Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is forced to reveal abilities never before seen in the Shinobi world part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Sasuke-kun, we should leave now. Orochimaru spoke to the raven-haired Uchiha as they stared down at the crippled Konoha team consisting of Yamato, Sakura, Sai and one Uzumaki Naruto. No. The Uchiha spoke, turning to face his mentor. I will gain the power I need to kill my brother here and now, Orochimaru. He spoke calmly as he gripped his Kusanagi. Orochimaru eyed the raven-haired Uchiha for a moment before a sick grin spread across his pale features. Very well, he muttered. The three Oto elites leapt down, charging at the four-leaf Nines. Orochimaru headed for Yamato, who was still feeling the effects of the injury he received from Sasuke's lightning-empowered sword. Kabuto charged at Sai, while Sasuke charged at Sakura, discarding Naruto as a threat for the moment, since he was still feeling the effects of having Kyuubi's chakra suppressed so suddenly. Yamato fell easily enough, his injured and half-paralyzed state being no match for the power and experience of the snake ninja. Sai was holding his own against Kabuto, but the medic's experience was quickly gaining him an edge in the battle. Sakura tried to defend against Sasuke, but her heart wasn't in the battle and so was quickly overpowered. Naruto struggled to his feet. He wasn't sure what the hell Sasuke had done to him, but whatever it was, he had to shake it off. He looked to the left where Sai was fighting Kabuto, then to the right, to Yamato's unconscious form sprawled over a pile of rubble. Finally he looked towards Sasuke and Sakura. The Uchiha was holding her up by her throat, the sword pressing against her stomach ready to impale her. The Uchiha prodigy looked to the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and let a slow, cruel smirk grace his features. Naruto's eyes widened in momentary panic. He stood, ignoring the pain he felt, and rushed towards them, despite the fact that he knew he would never be able to reach them in time. Sasuke turned from the blonde in order to face his victim. The small bit of lightning chakra he was pushing into her system was just enough to keep her from using her monstrous strength properly. He smirked at her frightened expression, and reared his sword back in preparation for the final blow. Before he could act on his murderous intentions, however, he caught sight of a pale blue light in his peripheral vision just before it hit him full force. A scream of pain lodged itself in his throat as it hit. With a start he realized he was being struck by lightning. He painfully opened his eyes and saw the lightning was coming from Naruto's fingertips. How the hell did that moron have an affinity for lightning? Such an affinity was rare anywhere outside of Kumo. Naruto continued to focus as hundreds of volts of lightning shot through his palms. He could begin to see the signs of burns appearing on the Uchiha prodigy's skin as the lightning struck him. All the while he remained calm, focused, clearing his mind of all hesitation. Sakura, Sai, Kabuto, and Orochimaru all turned and stared at the sight in complete shock. The snake Sannin was the first to snap out of his stupor and in a disgusting display summoned Kusanagi from his throat, the legendary blade glowing pale blue in the bright desert light as he charged the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Naruto snapped his attention to the approaching snake Sannin. He cut the flow of lightning to one hand and extended it towards Orochimaru instead. The Sannin ignored it as he kept on moving forward when suddenly, a large stone, almost the size of a basketball, shot straight up from the ground and stayed floating at a height that was level with his face. Now we have a floating rock in front of him, and he can't stop. The result is Orochimaru's face smashed right into the stone with enough force to flip him over as if they just caught him in a clothesline maneuver, and break his nose. The air left him in a whoosh as he hit the floor face down. He rolled to the side just as the rock he had hit fell, nearly crushing his skull altogether. When he looked to the stone that had just crashed next to him, he was surprised as it began moving towards him at a fast rate of speed. He flipped sideways, getting to his feet as he rolled over the stone aimed for him. He had to keep moving as more and more stones began flying towards him. Anything from the size of baseballs to tables moved through the air with practiced ease. How in the hell was the Jinchuriki doing this? He had never heard of any bloodline or Doton jutsu which allowed control to a degree such as this. The only thing remotely similar was the Shikaku container's sand. Kabuto broke off his fight with Sai and charged the Konoha ninja from behind. Naruto, sensing his approach, looked over his shoulder in time to see Kabuto lunge at him, chakra scalpel in one hand, kunai in the other. Cutting off the lightning from his other hand, he turned and faced Kabuto. The Oto medic felt the air leave his lungs as some invisible force hit him hard and pushed him back with enough force to send him crashing into the wall. The already unstable wall collapsed with the force of his hit, falling right on top of the silver-haired medic. Sasuke coughed and groaned in pain. He opened his eyes and saw Naruto's back was to him as he was focused on the other two ninja. He gritted his teeth, snarling in anger as his Sharingan flared to life. He had trained under Orochimaru for 3 years. The strongest of the Sannin, he had the Sharingan. He refused to be humiliated by this nobody again. So, blocking out the immense pain coursing through his system, he stood, his Kusanagi cackling with lightning as he charged the blonde ninja. Naruto, hearing the familiar sound of the technique he had been hit with more than once, turned and found Sasuke had already closed half the distance between them. Sasuke saw the blonde reaching to his orange jacket, from which he pulled out a strange cylindrical object roughly 1 to 1.5 feet long and about an inch thick. He could see there were identical openings at each end and was made of a very strange type of metal, but he paid no heed. Whatever the object was, his sword would cut through it, and even if Naruto dodged, he would still be paralyzed from the lightning chakra around the blade. Soon, however, Sasuke wished he had paid attention as a bright purple beam of light materialized out of the small opening on one end of the cylindrical device. With fast yet wide swing, Sasuke's sword was stopped dead as the lightning met the strange blade. Sasuke was so caught off guard he didn't react until he felt something hit him in the chest hard, pushing him back until he hit the far wall just as Kabuto did earlier. Naruto had taken his hand away from Orochimaru and pushed Sasuke away. That, however, left the snake Sannin his opening. As soon as the barrage of earthly projectiles ceased, Orochimaru wasted no time before he rushed the ninja at full speed, making sure no stones appeared in front of him like before. Naruto sensed Orochimaru's approach, and with a flick of a small switch another beam appeared on the other side of the cylindrical device, turning it into a double-bladed weapon. He spun around on his heels, using the new blade to block the Kusanagi. The legendary weapon hissed as it came in contact with the superheated beam of energy, and Orochimaru pulled back to inspect it, noting that the edge that had touched was red hot. If it would have stayed any longer, it would have been completely melted. He knew that Kusanagi was a blade made with the scales of the snake summons themselves. If that light sword was able to do this much damage to Kusanagi with just a few moments of contact, he had no doubt that that blade could cut through almost any other sword with ease. Naruto took his stance, but then noticed Sasuke had recovered behind him. He would never be able to take on both Orochimaru and Sasuke. He wasn't that good, nowhere near that good. Orochimaru smirked, but it soon died as a swirl of ink revealed Sai standing behind Naruto, facing Sasuke. The snake Sannin growled and moved to step forward when he caught sight of a blur to his right. He looked and managed to catch sight of Sakura's fist before she nailed him dead in the face. His attention had been focused solely on the Jinchuriki, and so didn't even notice her until it was too late. He stood up angrily, setting his broken jaw into place with various cracks as he snarled at the three. He vanished and reappeared where Kabuto had been buried in rubble. With a small Doton Jutsu, the medic was freed. The snake ninja grabbed him by his shirt and looked to Sasuke. "Sasuke, can we leave?" he ground out as he glared at the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. He knew nothing of these abilities he had demonstrated, and so it would be best to retreat until he learned more. Sasuke's eyes narrowed as he shook in silent fury before he began to vanish in a wisp of smoke, Orochimaru doing the same after a moment. Naruto sighed, relaxing his guard as the purple laser-like sword dissipated and he hooked the cylindrical hilt back onto his belt. He turned and saw the curious/suspicious/amazed look in Sakura and Sai's eyes. Yamato was unconscious and so didn't really have any facial expression. He laughed somewhat nervously as he scratched the back of his head. I guess I got some explaining to do, don't I? It was several hours later. Yamato found himself staring at his blonde-haired charge with an expression that clearly read, "What the fuck?" His right arm was in a sling and his left leg was in a cast made from wood. "Susa," he drawled. "You single-handedly held back 2 high Jounin level missing nin and a Sannin?" he questioned incredulously. Naruto blushed and nodded with a sheepish smile on his face. Sakura and Sai watched the exchange with thoughts similar to Yamato's words. Sai's eyes were narrowed in slight suspicion. Those abilities he had used, especially the lightning, would take a great deal of chakra, but he had felt no chakra spike, meaning he had either used very little or none at all, something that was impossible. And then those stones he had used against Orochimaru. If he didn't know any better, he would say Naruto had used some form of telekinesis, an ability which was only speculated existed, let alone being able to use it on such a large scale. Yamato sighed and leaned against the wall of the house he had made using his Makidan technique. "Alright, come on, I want a full explanation." Naruto's features became serious so quickly it was almost scary. "Sorry, but I don't really trust you that much. I will tell Tsunade though. I trust her more than you." Yamato raised an eyebrow and spoke again. "Naruto, tell me what it was that you did, and how you did it now. You don't have the luxury of telling Tsunade directly, so as your commander I order you to explain your abilities." He really didn't want to pull rank, But these abilities could be potentially dangerous, and letting him near Tsunade without knowing what he could do was foolish. Naruto's eyes narrowed and he suddenly waved his hand. You will drop this subject and let me discuss this with Tsunade personally. To Sai and Sakura's amazement, Yamato suddenly spoke. I will drop this subject and let you speak with Tsunade personally. Naruto smiled. Thank you, Yamato-sensei, he said cheerfully as he turned and walked away, pointedly ignoring Sai and Sakura's gazes as he left the room. The two aforementioned teammates blinked stupidly before looking at each other, exchanging a silent question. What the fuck just happened? They each thought about going after the blonde but decided against it, deciding they were too tired and too injured to deal with trying to get answers out of him for now. Tomorrow they would be back at the village where they would hopefully get some answers. Later that night, Naruto came a gentle voice that penetrated the darkness of his sleep. Said blonde opened his eyes, his body feeling weightless as he floated through a sea of stars. What's wrong, Naruto? The same disembodied voice reached him again. I sense you're troubled for some reason. He sighed. They found out as he spoke, his voice echoed all around him, as if he was an empty chamber. And I still think it's too soon. Shiyu had no choice. I would have done no different if I were in your place. You have shown a great deal of restraint in the use of your skills so far, and I am proud of you for it. But still, I should have maybe tried something else. I don't think I'm ready yet. Whether you are ready or not, you acted to save your friends and allies. I find no fault in your actions, and neither should you. Now rest. You will need your strength for your upcoming confrontation with Tsunade. He sighed again but nevertheless obeyed and drifted off to a dreamless sleep. The next day found the aptly named Team Kakashi making their long trek back to Konoha. Yamato was in deep contemplative silence. Sai continued to send wary and suspicious glances toward Naruto. Sakura also sent glances his way, but these were of slight nervousness overshadowed by curiosity. Naruto walked with an air of indifference/boredom/anxiousness. The strange cylindrical object at his side, from where the purple laser sword had come from, was dangling innocently from his belt. Sakura bit her lip. All night her mind's eye continued to flash at Sasuke's cold features. He was truly going to kill her. Somewhere in the back of her mind she knew that he would have done so from the moment she took the mission, but she had been hoping she was wrong. She looked to Naruto. He had saved her again. She wanted to thank him but figured that now was not the proper place for it. Instead, she looked for something that could break this godforsaken silence. She found it in the cylindrical object hanging from his waist. Hey Naruto, she began tentatively. Yes, Sakura-chan? He questioned as he looked over his shoulder at her with a smile on his face. She hesitated for a moment, remembering that he wanted to talk to Tsunade about this. Well, I was wondering if you tell me what that is. She questioned, pointing at it. Naruto looked down at the item in question, contemplating if he should answer the question when he figured A, she would find out soon enough, and B, there was really no harm in telling her about it. It's called a lightsaber, he answered with a smile tugging at his lips as he unhooked it from his belt and turned it on with the press of a button. The blade glowed and hummed gently in his hand. He smiled somewhat fondly at the futuristic weapon. He gave it a few swings through the air, the bright purple light trailing behind somewhat, leaving a small trail in its wake as it hummed with each swing. It can cut through anything. Sakura stared with open awe. Now that she could stop and take a good look at the weapon, she had to admit that it held an aura of power, elegance, grace, beauty, and even a small hint of brutality. Yamato and Sai meanwhile stared in silent curiosity. The only weapon that they knew of that was remotely similar was the Night Aim's Raijin. Naruto. Yamato spoke up next. How much chakra does it take to do that? At that, Naruto's grin threatened to split his face in two. That's the best thing, he exclaimed brightly. It doesn't use any chakra at all. Yamato stopped dead, while Sakura gawked and Sai seemed to trip over himself. Naruto kept on smiling as he walked ahead of the group of stunned ninja, all the while hiding his unease at the upcoming confrontation. It was late at night when the group arrived in Konoha and finished giving their report. Is that all you have to report? Tsunade questioned the aptly named Team Kakashi. Yamato nodded and then both turned their eyes to Naruto. The blonde shuffled from foot to foot nervously before he looked to Tsunade. Could we talk in a private? Sakura felt a little hurt that he wouldn't trust her with this, but at Tsunade's nod she, along with the rest of the team, walked out of the door only to press close and listen through it a moment later. Well, Naruto, you mind explaining? Naruto sighed and rubbed his head to fight off the oncoming headache. Well, let me start by telling you who taught me. Have you ever heard of a woman named Revan? Tsunade stiffened. Revan? Well, what does she have to do with this? She died during the QB attack. She's not dead, she's the one who trained me, and she's also my mother. Your mother? Came the incredulous yell from the slug Sannin. You know who your parents are? Indeed, Naruto's lineage was a complete mystery even to her. All medical files had been blacked out at certain parts, and the old hospital was destroyed in the QB attack, meaning the Yondame's medical files were also destroyed, meaning it was nigh impossible to prove what she herself and Jiraiya believed. Naruto nodded and took a deep breath. Let me start from the beginning. She leaned back in her chair and nodded. Naruto was about to speak when he paused and looked at her dead in the eye. Look, a lot of the stuff I'm about to tell you is gonna sound like I need to be heading to the funny farm, but I swear I am not crazy and I am telling you the absolute truth. She nodded slowly. She had known Revan only in passing and had seen her once during one of her short visits to the village. Long raven black hair, her stride, powerful and graceful. The woman seemed to exude a charisma of sorts. Now that she thought about it, it was very similar to the charisma Naruto had. Meanwhile, outside the door, Sakura, Sai and Yamato continued to press their ears against the wooden surface in an attempt to listen into the conversation. I can't hear anything. What about you guys? Yamato asked. Sakura and Sai shook their heads. Sakura sighed and shook her head. No, let's stop this. If Naruto wants to tell us, he'll tell us. We shouldn't eavesdrop on him. Yamato growled and suddenly took on the scary face, you know, the one he used to creep Naruto out with, which made Sai and Sakura pale slightly as his ghostly features rounded on them. I want to know you will help me. Sakura gulped and nodded, while Sai, fearing slightly for his health, followed her example. The area around Yamato suddenly brightened, bright and sunny, unlike the dark, foreboding aura that had surrounded him only moments ago. Good. He chirped before straightening and getting a serious expression. Now Team Kakashi Operation Eavesdrop on Naruto begins. If he would have looked down, he would have realized that Sai had already made a small mouse of ink that went under the door to listen into the conversation, and would return with the sought knowledge. As he vanished in a puff of smoke, Sakura looked to Sai, then to the spot Yamato had previously occupied, then back to Sai, and then back to Yamato's spot. Sai looked at her before smiling that creepy blank smile of his. Sakura sighed and smacked her forehead. Why do I get such strange teammates? Because you're a hag. The artist helpfully put in. And so Sai's face met the floor of the basement floor. Naruto took a deep breath and began. My mother isn't from here, Tsunade. She's not even from this planet. Hell, she's not even from this galaxy. Tsunade's raised eyebrow, he continued. My mom comes from the galaxy right next to ours. The technology there is very advanced from what she's told me. Cities and buildings easily taller than the monument. Things they can use to fly and heal wounds instantly without chakra. Amazing, really, if you think about it. It is amazing, she conceded, leaning back. If it's all true. Naruto smirked. He had expected that. Yes, well, anyway, this galaxy is ruled by the Galactic Republic. It's lasted for a few good millennia, but in recent years things have been getting worse and worse. The Republic's become weak. The only thing keeping it together is its military, and the group of people called Jedi. Now, my mom was, and still is, one of these Jedi. They're able to use the same powers I used to stop Orochimaru. They use a different kind of energy than us. Chakra is more of a physical energy, something that we can bring out with training our physical bodies. What they use is something they simply call the Force. Now the Force is much more spiritual and abstract than our chakra. It requires more mental focus and control than ours does. Tsunade raised an eyebrow and Naruto laughed sheepishly. Sorry, had to memorize these things before I was able to learn them. She nodded and gestured for him to continue. Anyway, the Jedi are the peacekeepers of the galaxy. They're divided by ranks, as you can imagine. The first rank is Padawan, something equivalent to our Genin. Then they have an unofficial rank called Jedi, which is the equivalent of a Chunin, then the Jedi Knight, who is allowed to train Padawans, and then the Jedi Masters, who are at the head of the Jedi Council and are the leaders of the Jedi. Anyway, the Republic has been in a rapid decline since a war about 20 years ago called the Mandalorian War. This was between the standing government of the Republic and a warrior society called the Mandalorians. To the Republic's eyes, the Jedi were their greatest asset, so naturally they went to the Jedi Council to ask or demand their assistance. The Jedi Council, however, felt that if they rushed in, then they would throw everything against the Mandalorians and lose against whatever force might have been behind them. So they decided to go with a wait-and-see approach. Tsunade couldn't help but snort at that. Even she could see that more damage would be done if swift action wasn't taken. Naruto nodded and smirked, deciphering the meaning of the snort. Anyway, while the Jedi Masters said to wait, Mommy dearest basically said. Take your patience and shove it, and went off to fight the Mandalorians. It could have just been her, but he looked definitively proud of that fact. She smirked. You definitely have no respect for rank, so I guess you are her son if what you say is true. He smirked and continued. It wasn't long after she joined that she climbed the ranks until she was practically in command of the whole fleet. Sakura moved up to the roof and leaned over the edge to try and listen in on the conversation. She was frustrated when she realized she needed to get closer in order. She placed her hand down to get some leverage on one of the roof tiles only to have the ceramic tile slip and slide down the angled edge of the roof. Oh shit. Yamato smirked as he began to pull himself up to the balcony, his head just peeking up where he could see Tsunade and Naruto discussing over whatever it was they were discussing. He heard Naruto's voice. Oh, man of the entire fleet. Fleet? Are they talking about one of Kiri's navy forces? He cloaked himself with a genjutsu and moved to climb over the edge of the balcony when... Clang. A roof tile dropped down from nowhere, landing dead center atop his head. The world seemed to spin as he stumbled, and his chakra slipped. Next thing he knew, he was falling down to the hard, solid, rapidly approaching ground. He got that oh shit look on his face before he began looking around for anything he could use to stop his descent. Finally, he caught sight of one of the Konoha banners dangling innocently from the wall of an administration building across the street from the tower. He formed his hand seals and formed a wooden extension to his arm, which he used to push himself towards his salvation. He grabbed the waving banner tightly, ignoring the ripping and tearing sound as he planted his feet against the wall, and jumped off. Right into a rose bush that was full of thorns. Oh wow. So she eventually stopped the Mandalorians from moving any further, and then started pushing them back. The final battle was above one of the Mandalorians' holy planets. Malakar V. What do you mean, above the planet? Tsunade interrupted. I told you that they had ships that could fly. They used those ships to fight above the planet. Tsunade shook her head. If this story got any weirder, she really would have to call the funny farm. The only thing keeping him here was the fact that his techniques were of mysterious origins. He knew about a woman named Revan and the sword Yamato reported he used. The lightsaber was a piece of technological equipment centuries beyond anything she knew of. Anyway, he continued, she beat the Mandalorians on Malakar V. Then she took her personal fleet to the edges of her galaxy, otherwise known as the Outer Rim. She told the Republic that she went to hunt down the remaining Mandalorians that escaped the battle. But what she really went for was to investigate the Sith. Sith? Naruto nodded. Yeah, the Sith are like the sworn enemy of the Jedi. I don't know the whole story, but basically at one point one Jedi said that the Force should be used to protect people, then another one said that the Force should be used as a weapon. So I guess what happened was that the Force was kinda split. Light side and dark side. The Jedi used the light side and the Sith used the dark side. She nodded, indicating that she understood. So anyway, when she made it to the rim, she said she felt the power of the Sith like a blanket around the area. She said she knew that neither the Republic, nor the Jedi as they were could hope to stand up to them if they choose to invade. So she made a plan. She stayed with her fleet beyond the Outer Rim where they were exposed to the pull of the dark side. Pull of the dark side? Naruto scratched his head. It's complicated, but both the dark side and the light side have a voice, or a feel to them. The light is like a soft song that soothes you. He paused somewhat uneasily. And the dark side? She questioned. He sighed again. I only felt the dark side's call once, and it was very faint. But it was like a seducing voice, making you feel that if you went to it you would be able to do anything. But it has a sick edge to it, like a snake ready to sink its fangs into your neck when you get too close. She could tell that this was an uncomfortable subject for him, and so let it drop for now. So continue. Right, she let them feel the pull of the dark side, let them stir in it until finally, after almost 6 months, they gave into it. She stirred their hatred for the Jedi that refused to fight, and the Republic's apparent weakness, driving them to near madness. That's when she decided revolution was in order. She made her way from the rim to an ancient weapon known as the Starforge. The Starforge was a massive space station, which used energy from the star it orbited to create a virtually endless fleet of fighters, droids, and ships. Droids? Machines that can be used for combat and don't need a human to control them, he answered curtly. Now, as I was saying, the Starforge was like one big factory, rolling out everything they needed for wars except people to fight in them. So with the Starforge, the people that abandoned the Republic due to their loyalty to her, and the fact that she caught the Republic completely blindsided allowed her to capture a lot of key points along the rim, places that she was regarded damn near like a goddess due to her actions during the war, places where she began recruiting. So she started another war? Tsunade asked somewhat incredulously. Did she fall to this dark side too? Was that why she did it? Naruto shook his head. She fell to the dark side, but it was in a different way than others. I don't know how to explain it, you'd have to ask her. Still, getting back on topic, the Republic had become stagnant in its late life while her methods of cleaning house were a bit over the top. She felt that the only way for her to adequately prepare the Republic, and the Jedi she had to rebuild them from scratch, it would have worked too. What failed? About a year or so into her campaign, she was betrayed by her old friend and classmate, some guy called Malik. She was captured by the Jedi because of it. From what I understand, the Jedi Council used a very powerful force technique on her mind, and it's like placing a clean sheet over a dirty one. They covered up her memories and made new ones over them, hoping that she would unconsciously be able to lead them to the place where she had gotten her fleet, while also helping the Republic against Malik and his Sith. Can you use this technique? She questioned almost eagerly. This was something that could be worth more gold than what she had in the depository. Naruto blinked. As a matter of fact, no, I can't. He deadpanned, causing Tsunade to nearly face-plant. She growled and glared at him with something that would have made Itachi cringe. But Mom can, he said just a little too quickly. Her eyebrow rose. What do you mean? He sighed in relief. Mom's a lot stronger in force techniques than I am, a lot stronger than a lot of those old guys on the council. She could probably do it. Her eyebrow rose even more. Where is your mother, Naruto? He waved her down. Wait, I haven't finished telling the story. She sighed but nodded. So like I said, they wiped her mind clean and made a fake life over her old one and had her serve the fleet. Eventually, she and a Republic soldier named Karthonasai. What kind of name is that? She chuckled at the strange-sounding name, making Naruto shrug. Hey, I guess our names would sound pretty weird to them. He shot back. Tsunade nodded. He had a point, though the smile still tugged at her lips. Anyway, the ship she was stationed on was ambushed, and they crash-landed on some planet called Taris, where she met a Twi'lek named. Twi'lek? It's some kind of alien. They sort of look like human, but their skin is a different color. Blue and green are the more common colors among them, and they have like two tentacle-ish thing that stick out of their heads. Remember that the Republic spans the entire galaxy. Hundreds of species beside humans inhabit it. She nodded again. Though it was a little weird to wrap her mind about the concept of aliens, and what these Twi'leks would look like, she did her best. The Twi'lek's name was Mission Vale. Mission's friend also met up with her, a Wookiee called Zalber. From what she described, the average Wookiee is 8 feet tall and looks like a cross between a human, a bear, and a lion. She again tried to imagine these vague descriptions, but they proved difficult for her. So with Mission's help, along with Karth and Zalber, she managed to rescue some important Jedi girl called Bastila who had crashed on the planet with them. After that, they had to find a way to get off the planet without anyone noticing, since the Sith had a blockade around the planet. They found a way to get off planet with a Mandalorian named Canderous, who had been working as a small-time mercenary since the defeat at Malacca V. So anyway, with Canderous' connections, they managed to steal a relatively small ship called the Ebon Hawk and broke through the Sith blockade and made their way to a planet called Dantooine, where there was a Jedi enclave. At this time, Mom's force powers were starting to come back, and the Jedi Masters on Dantooine feared that they could get out of control and lead her to the dark side again. So they retrained her, hoping that this time she would stay on the light side. Eventually, through her resurfacing memories, she managed to find a place where there was a piece of a map that could lead her to the Starforge. But anyway, to make a really long story short, she and the rest of her companions went to some different planets to discover the rest of the pieces of the map. On the way, they met some more companions, including another droid that Mom said was kinda homicidal, another alien called Juhani, and an old man called Jolie. Bastila got captured by Malik, turned to the dark side, and then brought back into the light by Mom. She then moved on, killed Malik, and destroyed the Starforge. Yay! His last statement was done as somehow confetti rained down around him with a party hat on and a little flag with the words "Mom Kicks Ass" waving behind him, with two pictures, one of a woman with black hair and another bald man with some kind of metal plate covering his lower jaw, underneath them small scribbles which read, "Mom 1, ugly bald guy 0, truly something of Guy and Lee's caliber," since the flag looked to be taller than the room. She twitched in mild irritation mixed with bafflement at how he could make this genjutsu. She couldn't dispel it. It was like Guy and Lee all over again. So what happened after that? The flag, confetti, and party hat disappeared, and Naruto again had a serious face. After that, things looked like they would finally settle down, but after 2 years or so, her memories started coming back, reminding her as to why she had started war with the Republic in the first place. Tsunade looked momentarily surprised, even she had forgotten about that. She knew that starting another war would be just retarded at this point even if she wanted to do it, and so decided that she wouldn't wait for the Sith beyond the Outer Rim to attack and decided to take the fight to them. How? Simple, she took her ship, went to the very edge of the rim, rented another ship and simply, flew where they were, beyond the edge of the galaxy. I don't know much about what she did beyond there, but she said there were 8 Sith Lords, she killed 7. It took her 3 years, and she pursued the last one to this galaxy, where her ship gave out, and she crash-landed here. My old man found her, helped her heal, and in turn she helped him make plans that ultimately led to our holding out against IWA until Dad was able to invent the jutsu that forced Iwa's surrender. Wait, you don't mean? Yes, I do, he interrupted, grinning. My old man is the Yondaime. His grin was so wide it threatened to split his face in two. You have no idea how long I've wanted to brag about that. Tsunade's shock was soon replaced by a calm, placid look. Naruto, I trust you, but I cannot accept these claims without even a shred of proof. Something must have been documented, or your mother, since you say she's still alive and apparently know where she is. I need to see her before I can even begin to accept these statements as true. His smile became a bit more subdued, but it stayed firmly on his face. Should I do it? Yes, it's time, came the familiar whisper in his mind. He nodded and took a scroll from his pocket. He looked around her desk, but there was no brush or ink. Hold on a sec, he said before he began making his way to the door. Meanwhile, Sai, who had just recovered from his fall, limped back to the door, where his ink mouse crawled out from the bottom crack of the door. He took his brush and touched the small animal, where it dissolved into ink that was absorbed by the small brush hairs. Sai, what are you doing? Came Yamato's voice. His clothes and hair were covered in various branches, leaves, and thorns. Sai took out a scroll which he filled with his chakra as he unrolled it. As soon as my brush touches this scroll with my chakra, their entire conversation will be written down here, and we'll be able to read it word for word. Yamato smirked. That's brilliant. The door opened, revealing Naruto. The two froze at the sound of his voice. Hey lady, we need some. He paused as he noticed Sai, holding a brush with ink. He smirked and before they could blink grabbed the brush and plucked it out of his fingertips. Thanks, Sai, this is just what I needed. He chirped before closing the door in their faces. Sai and Yamato looked to the door, to the area missing the paintbrush, then back to the door again. God damn it. Tsunade watched with piqued interest as Naruto wrote a large kanji in the scroll and knelt down on the floor. He punched different areas on the floor as if looking for something. Finally, after a minute or so, one of the floorboards opened. Naruto's grin widened as he placed the scroll into the small opening. The newly written kanji glowed as he ran his blood and a bit of chakra over the seal. She watched in fascination as more seals appeared on her floor and trailed up to the wall, where another seal appeared and glowed brightly. Naruto walked over, ran his blood again over the seal, only to have the wall open again, revealing a single kunai embedded into a stone hidden in the wall. It only took her a moment to recognize it was the Yondaime's kunai, the one he used for the Hiraishin. Naruto grinned before calling Tsunade over. She stood and walked over, observing the familiar kunai with wonder. It was a sight she never thought she'd see again. How do you? Ji-chan showed me when I was 3 and Mom showed me what hand seals to use. You mean you know the Hiraishin? She nearly screamed as she rounded on him. No, of course not, he said, waving her off. Only Dad knew how to do that. He designed this kunai to simply take us to another he placed somewhere else. It was his hideout. He explained before he formed 3 quick seals and offered her his hand. She hesitated for only a moment before she firmly grasped his hand. He smiled before he gripped the kunai in the wall. There was only a bright yellow flash before they were both gone without leaving so much as a trace. When Tsunade regained her bearings, she swayed uneasily on her feet as the world spun around her and her stomach lurched uncomfortably. She felt Naruto's hand on her shoulder steadying her as the spinning finally stopped and she was able to steady herself on her own 2 feet. It took me a while to get used to it too, Naruto said with a smile. She turned to him as he looked around curiously. She began looking around as well. They were in a forest, no real surprise there. A large stone about 5 feet tall was in front of them, where another of Arashi's 3-pronged kunai lay embedded deeply into the stone as fireflies flew around the area, illuminating it dimly. She could also tell that they were nowhere near any civilization. Whatever this place was, it was well hidden. All right, Naruto, where are we? She questioned. Naruto looked around. We are currently near the crash site of Mom's ship. Tsunade looked around. Finding nothing but trees and insects, she spoke again. Well, where is it? Naruto raised a single finger and opened his mouth to answer, but suddenly closed it and let his finger drop as his eyes rolled upwards, looking confused and as if he was trying to remember. Don't tell me you forgot? She seethed as a vein ticked on her temple, ready to pound the memory back into him if she needed to. He did not build up all this anticipation just to tell her he forgot where this ship was. No, of course I haven't forgotten. He huffed indignantly before turning his back to her. Looking around, he let his hand slowly point right, then swerve to the left, then to the right again before finally turning and pointing in the general direction behind her. That way direction, he mumbled as he leapt up to take to the trees. Tsunade growled, promising pain to the young man if he was wasting her time before she rushed after him. A few minutes later the two blondes broke through the tree line, and Tsunade had to hold back a gasp of surprise at the sight that greeted her. Indeed, there was a strange metal structure before her, rust-covered, dented, and with foliage growing around it, but it was still definitely alien. A large jagged trench along the ground along with the faint remains of broken branches and trees showed her that this object had indeed crashed here and had done so with plenty of force, as it had apparently been dragged several dozen yards through the dirt. It was about the size of a small house, but she couldn't find any openings from which to enter. Naruto walked confidently up to the strange vessel and Tsunade followed silently. I used to come here all the time before the academy. She heard him as he began to tap the ship's hull, listening to the hollow sound as it echoed slightly. Sarutobi led you here often? She questioned. Yup, he affirmed, smiling as he found what he was looking for. She watched as he pushed in a panel, which slid up revealing a series of buttons with pictures she didn't recognize. He pressed them in a seemingly random order, and with a hiss Tsunade saw the hull open, revealing a ramp that led up to the ship. Naruto smiled as he entered and looked over his shoulder at her. Well, you come in? She looked at the strange metallic hallway before she silently entered, sending wary glances at everything. This is where I came to train my force techniques. It was always easier to do since I was so much closer to Mom. Your mother was here? She questioned, her interest peaking again at the mention of the elusive Revan. He reached another of the sealed metallic doors with strange buttons next to it. He pressed them again in a seemingly random pattern before looking back at her and smiling. She was and still is, he said before the door opened. Tsunade stifled a gasp. Lying before her in a seemingly metallic bed or slab was a woman. Black hair which framed her narrow, aristocratic features, her hands interlocked over her stomach. She had a red leather, form-fitting armor above the waist with black cloth sleeves and gloves and red arm bracers. A black cape and long black skirt with a red sash around her waist which hung down to the side and acted as a loose belt. Naruto walked forward, smiling softly at the form before them. Tsunade followed, recovered from her shock, and followed, confirming that this really was beyond a doubt the same woman she had met so long ago. She's in a coma? The Godane questioned, turning to the blonde. Naruto nodded. Yeah, she used a mind trick to stall the Kyuubi so Dad could complete the technique, but when the fox discovered what was going on and fought back, he was too strong. She kept on struggling instead of dropping the technique. The result was that it sort of disconnected her mind. Add to that the physical injuries she got from the fight with the fox, and at this point, she's using most of her energy to sustain herself. What do you mean? And if this happened during the Kyuubi attack, then how is it that she trained you? Naruto sighed and rubbed his forehead. It's complicated, but people strong in the Force can communicate with other Force sensitives telepathically. Mom's mind was going to be destroyed completely because of Kyuubi, so the Force kind of shielded her, separated her from her physical body to give her time to recuperate. I think I understand, it's like a coma. She's away from her body waiting for it to heal. But she can still communicate, at least with you. Naruto nodded. Tsunade looked to the resting woman again before she spoke. Do you know how long she will be in this state? Or if she'll get out of it at all? Naruto sighed, and for once his face took on a sad expression. She would have healed already if she would have completely rested. But she's currently using almost all her energy helping me. Even now? I mean, from what I can tell, you're at least adept at these force techniques, so there's no need for her to keep training you. Why doesn't she stop and use that energy to heal herself? Naruto sighed again. Her training of me isn't really an issue. What's keeping her from focusing on her own healing is because she's helping keep the fox out of my head. What do you mean? There's a reason Gaara's demon could torment him despite the fact that he was sealed? Because his seal was weaker than yours, she stated. Yes. He nodded. That's true, and I would most likely never even hear the fox when I was awake. But what about when I'm asleep? All defenses are dropped then, and he'd probably be able to talk to me in my sleep. Mom has placed several mental barriers against the fox. I've just started to learn how to place them myself. Hopefully someday soon, I'll be able to hold those barriers up myself, and then she'll be able to heal her mind and body and well wake up. He finished placing his hand on the metallic bedside as his expression turned to a longing one. Tsunade felt pity swell up for the young man and turned her eyes again onto the sleeping form. You said that some of her injuries were physical. Maybe I can heal her. It would expedite her recovery. Naruto smiled but shook his head. No, it won't work. Healing jutsu has no effect on her. It might be because she doesn't use chakra or because her injuries were caused by the fox, but it just doesn't work. He sighed again before looking around somewhat angrily. If some of the medical equipment around here still worked, or if we knew how to use it, he grumbled, we'd be able to use it to heal her. Tsunade looked around some more before she spoke, noticing that there was no for or feeding tube in her. Meaning that someone had to be actively taking care of her. Naruto, who takes care of Revan while you're not here? He looked momentarily surprised. Hey yeah, where is she anyway? He questioned himself as he turned and began running around the ship. Hello. He drawled, opening and closing the mechanical doors throughout the ship. Nei-chan, where are you, Lu? Nei-chan? She questioned silently as she watched him scurry about the ship. He opened another door. Nei-chan, he was cut off as a foot connected solidly with his face, sending him clear across the cabin, smashing into another metal wall. What I want? Mumbled a sleepy female voice as a brown-haired woman walked out, rubbing her head to stave off the incoming headache. It only took Tsunade a moment to recognize the woman as she exited the room. Rin-ne Kawayan. Naruto whined, rubbing his sore cheek as he sat cross-legged on the floor. Did you have to hit me so hard? Brown shoulder-length hair, 2 orange markings on her cheeks, slim fit build and kind, but sleepy, eyes. This was Arashi's ex-student along with Kakashi's ex-teammate. Rin. The brown-haired medic grumbled before she looked down the hall towards the cockpit where the window was. She twitched as she noticed it was night time and went back into the room, coming back out with a wristwatch, her left eye twitching horribly. 2:45, you woke me up at 2:35, Naruto? She growled through clenched teeth as she practically breathed fire on his form, making him feel very small. It wasn't my fault, he cried in his own defense. Oh, then whose fault is it? She growled as she lifted him up by his collar and began shaking him. A swirly-eyed blonde could only manage to point behind her. She paused in her throttling of him and turned her eyes back to look at Tsunade, who watched the scene with a strange mixture of indifference/amusement/confusion. Rin blinked stupidly at the older woman before she turned back to Naruto and began shaking him even more. You idiot! She hissed. What the hell is wrong with you, Naruto? You know you're not supposed to bring anyone up here. But Nekein. He whined through his shaking. Things got complicated. Her eyes narrowed as she dropped him on his ass and sighed, half in exasperation and half in annoyance. I need some coffee. Fill me in while I make it. She turned to Tsunade, letting her eyes travel over her form. Weren't you older, Tsunade-sama? Nearly an hour later, the three sat around a small metallic table in the ship's living area. Rin hit a yawn with her fist as she spoke. So you mean to tell me that you managed to humiliate both Orochimaru and that stupid Uchiha kid? Naruto nodded. Rin nodded as well before she latched onto him in a spine-snapping hug. I'm so proud of you! She squealed loudly, nearly breaking his and Tsunade's eardrums. Her eyes gained a shiny, teary form as she sniffed. My little brother is growing up. He blushed and scratched the back of his head sheepishly before a cough turned their attention back to Tsunade. The older blonde took a deep breath. While this is all well and good, Naruto, your actions have had a serious impact. It won't take long for word to spread that a genin was able to hold off one of the Sannin, even less time when that genin is the container of the Kyuubi. Your abilities will have to be presented to the council, and I have to have them recorded either as original or family jutsu. He opened his mouth to protest, but Tsunade silenced him by turning to Rin. Rin, she sighed. By all accounts you should be labeled as a missing nin. But I know that it was most likely Sarutobi-sensei who planned this. Tsunade. Rin spoke. This cannot get out. Lady Revan was not well known among the shinobi world since she mainly kept to herself, but if people discovered her link to either Naruto-kun or Arashi-sensei, she will be in danger, and it's been a long time since I've fought. I won't be able to drive off any heavy hitters that their enemies may send here. Tsunade nodded slowly. Very well, Naruto, that means that these abilities must be listed as original techniques. Get Jiraiya to vouch for you. You spent 3 years with him after all. The blonde nodded slowly. Okay, Bachan. She growled in annoyance at the nickname but figured that now was not the time to plow him trough a wall for it. Alright, let's go back, get some rest, and tomorrow at noon, be in my office, Naruto. He nodded before he smiled his foxy grin. Don't worry, Bachan. Everything's gonna be fine. The sound of snores reached the ears of the Toad Hermit long before he entered the Ragada apartment. He found his annoyingly loud student sprawled over his bed at an awkward angle. One leg was up on the rim of the window next to the bed, his head was dangling off the side of the bed along with one arm, the sheets were everywhere but on his person, and a trail of drool fell from the corner of his mouth dripping down to the floor. The Toad Hermit walked forward and with as much delicacy as possible flipped the bed over, knocking his student down to the floor in a heap, the bed falling on top of him a moment later. A wow was the sleepy groan that reached his ears, followed closely by muffled curses on his existence as he kicked the side of the bed. Get up, the council meeting starts in an hour, and you need to get ready, brat. He turned and began leaving the room when a vase on Naruto's desk levitated and was suddenly flung towards his head, scoring a direct hit and drenching him in water as the flower vase shattered. Why, you little shit! He roared as he rounded on him. He had been having a bad day since he woke up, and it all started when he had been called into Tsunade's office. Flashback. Yo, flat chest, what'd you need me for? A book was promptly thrown in his face. He would have been punched into Snow Country, but then it would take him a while to get back, and she had no time to waste. Shut up and sit down, she snarled to the man as he rubbed his abused nose and followed instructions. You remember a woman called Revan, right? Yeah. He spoke slowly, as if asking, and the point of this is? Well, it turns out she is Naruto's mother. She expected him to look at her like she was crazy, she expected him to laugh in her face or at least show surprise. What she did not expect was his blank stare and his expectant expression, which clearly read, "And this is news to me, how?" Yo, you knew! She practically screeched as she stood, making him back up slightly as the fury could be clearly seen in her eyes. Of course I knew, he said, holding his hands in front of him in a warning gesture. You mean you didn't? How the hell was I supposed to know? She roared in his face, making him yell right back. It wasn't that stupid, Ellie. He trailed off as he remembered something. Flashback within a flashback. Hey, Shinsei, Jiraiya slurred as he stumbled into the office of the third Hokage. Jiraiya, drunk again, don't throw up on the carpet this time. He spoke in a bored tone as Jiraiya plopped down on the seat. It weighs an ugly's rug anyways. He slurred as he downed another gulp of the rice alcohol. It was a priceless artifact gifted to the Shodaime by the daimyo of Lightning Country more than 67 years ago. He snarled to his former apprentice. It was still an Yuglish rug. Sarutobi sighed and practically collapsed in his chair. I give up. He shook his head. Jiraiya, he began, but noticing the drool and snot bubble on forming on Jiraiya's left nostril stopped him as he stood and walked around his desk. He then firmly slapped Jiraiya across the face, waking him up. What? He grabbed Jiraiya's collar and shook him. Jiraiya! He yelled, turning the man's bloodshot and dazed eyes onto him. Look at me! He waved a piece of paper in front of the drunken man's face. Look, this is a letter. Inside this letter is Naruto's heritage. If anything should happen to me, you are to make sure the next person they choose as Hokage receives this letter. Do you understand? At Jiraiya's dazed nod, he placed the letter in his former apprentice's top pocket. Good. Now you can go, and remember to keep that letter safe. Jiraiya nodded stupidly before he began stumbling out of the office. He paused at the doorway, however, before stumbling over to a vase on the side of the room and placing his head so he looked down into it. No! Sarutobi screamed as he leapt over his desk, lunging for his former student. Don't you dare! That vase is over 300 years old, Jiraiya. But it was too late. With a heave and vomiting noise, the Toad Hermit spilled the contents of his stomach into the priceless artifact. He wobbled back and fell flat on his ass, letting Sarutobi overshoot him and crash right into the vase he wanted to protect, effectively shattering it. Jiraiya stumbled to his feet and walked out of the office without a care in the world, leaving Sarutobi, as he leaned over the shattered, vomit-covered remains of the vase as his hands twitched, willing it to reform into its former glory. Alas, it did not. He stood turned, walked out the door with a kunai in hand and laid eyes on the back of his prey. As he stalked forward, fully intent on delivering his divine vengeance, when one of his ambu appeared and held him back. Let me go! I'll kill him! That perverted moron! Sir, please calm down. You cannot kill him. Like hell I can't. Sir, please think of all the two of you have been through. A momentary pause in his struggles before they began again, this time more violent. Meanwhile, Jiraiya reached the outside of the tower. He felt an itch in his nose before he sneezed violently, barely managing to take out what he recognized as a tissue in his drunken state in time to catch the mucus that escaped his nose. He sniffed and without a second glance threw the tissue on the floor and continued on his way to the red light district. Flashback within a flashback end. Yes, Jiraiya? She questioned dangerously. It wasn't that stupid, what? Ehehehe. He laughed nervously. Never mind. He cleared his throat, adopting a serious expression. Anyway, I assume you're calling the council soon, since it won't take long for news to spread like wildfire that Naruto has unknown abilities. She nodded, deciding to let him slide for his stupidity this time. Yeah, we've decided to place them as original techniques, and we need you to vouch for it. Jiraiya nodded and stood. All right, consider it done. I'll go get the brat, he said as he made his way to the balcony. Oh, and Jiraiya. He was cut off as a fist connected with his jaw, sending flying out of the balcony. That's for calling me flat-chested, you lech. Flashback in. So yes, he was definitely having a bad day, and this little shit drenching him in dirty water was not helping, and neither was the phantom pain in his jaw. But when he turned around, the brat was already up and on the way to make his ramen. He sighed and did some quick hand seals to dry himself before he sat down. So, how are you feeling? Is this supposed to be a question out of concern, or perhaps an ingenious way to extract information? Naruto questioned as he entered back into the living room, steaming ramen cup in hand. Jiraiya snorted. Every time they were speaking in private, he turned much smarter, or at least acted like it, which is why he usually tended to ask him things in public, greater chance of getting what you want out of him that way. Both, he replied. Naruto noisily slurped some ramen before he spoke. Well, I feel nervous. But that's about it. Jiraiya nodded. Fair enough. He then leaned forward, with a smile so wide it threatened to split his face in two. So tell me, what was Orochi team's face like when you gave him a sound as kicking? At Naruto's wide smile, he knew he was going to enjoy this story. Naruto sighed as he stared at the massive wooden doors that led to the council chamber. He could hear the old crones speaking, but only faintly. He was waiting for Tsunade to arrive and going over what he was going to say in his head. He wasn't scared of the council. He just simply didn't like them. A few minutes later, Naruto heard footsteps behind him. Turning his head back to look, he found Tsunade coming towards him. She looked over to him and spoke. Ready? As I'll ever be, he replied. She nodded before she stepped forward and opened the massive oak doors effortlessly, Naruto following close behind. As soon as they entered, the entire room fell into such silence it was almost eerie. Naruto found two empty chairs, one in the center of the room, and the other a little off to the side. At Tsunade's gesture, he took the seat in the center, and she took the one to the side. He faced the council, whose seats were slightly higher so that they could appear imposing. He snorted at that. The only person here that was imposing was the Hyuga head. From the top row, a man that appeared to be as old as Sarutobi spoke. Uzumaki Naruto. You have been summoned here today, based on the, as of yet, unverified rumors that you use techniques of an unknown origin to single-handedly hold off S-Class Nukenin Orochimaru, a rank Nukenin Yakushi Kabuto, and a Class Nukenin Uchiha Sasuke. Do you understand? Naruto nodded, for once his features serious and unreadable to all but the master of impassiveness and head of the Hyuga clan, Hyuga Hayashi. Now then. The same council member spoke. Uzumaki Naruto, is it true that you have, in your recent A-rank mission, single-handedly managed to fight S-rank criminal Orochimaru, a rank ninja Uchiha Sasuke, and a rank medical ninja Yakushi Kabuto, by the means of unknown techniques? Naruto nodded. Yes, that is true. Very well. A slight pause. It has been stated in the report given to us by Tsunade-sama that these unknown techniques are of your own creation. Is that true? Naruto again nodded. Yes. Hayashi could have sworn he saw a slight hesitation, but it was too quick to judge just yet. From a few rows down, a younger member of the council spoke up. Uzumaki. I find it highly unlikely that one such as yourself, a genin, was able to hold off 3 of the strongest ninja in Oto by yourself. Even with unknown techniques, there's only so much I can believe. Naruto stood and walked to the end of the room. A demonstration, if you will. Why do you not simply explain the techniques? The first councilman asked. Because none of you will believe me if I did, it is much easier to show you than to go through a long, boring explanation which will end up in me eventually giving you a demonstration anyway because A, you'll ask for one and B, I like to show off. He finished with a cheesy grin making Tsunade slap her forehead in exasperation. He looked to the Umbu standing by the doorway. After a moment of silence the Umbu realized that he was the volunteer and walked to the other end of the room. Naruto nodded and let his arms fall to his sides, adopting an air of complete boredom. The Umbu shrugged before he took out a kunai and threw it to the blonde. Only to have him raise his hand and the weapon to stop a distance of 6 inches from him, levitating in midair. He heard many in the council gasp and refrained the urge to smirk as he began twirling the kunai in midair above his hand. That technique they heard Hayashi speak as they noticed he had activated his Byakugan. It uses no chakra. He did however notice a faint aura that moved with the technique, but he had never seen such a thing before. It looked more like a cloud of wispy smoke than anything else. Another series of gasps and Naruto really had to fight down a smirk. Hayashi deactivated his Byakugan and spoke. I assume that this technique can be more powerful? At Naruto's nod he continued. And I assume this was one of the techniques you used to hold off Orochimaru? Again another nod. Hayashi contemplated for a moment before he spoke clearly. Whenever this man took the floor no one opposed his taking over. Very well, you will display these techniques, explain them and we will categorize them. Naruto opened his mouth to speak when another council member spoke up. Hyuga-san. With all due respect, I believe that we should have Naruto-san not only display these techniques, but train some of our ninja as well. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he turned to the council member. I refuse. Excuse me? The council member spoke again. I refuse to train others in these techniques at your request. These are my techniques, and as such they will remain with me and my family, or any of those I choose to bring into my family. You foolish boy. The councilman snarled as he stood. If you, a lowly genin, could hold off an S-class criminal with these techniques, then just imagine what real ninja could do with such a. He stopped speaking suddenly, causing all of the people currently present in the room to turn and look at him. Only to see him frantically grabbing at his neck as an invisible hand seemed to be choking him. Hayashi activated his Byakugan, finding the smoke-like thing wrapped firmly around his throat and turned to Naruto, finding him with his hand outstretched as if gripping something. Uzumaki. He spoke calmly. The boy seemed to snap out of his daze before he released his grip, letting the council member heave and cough as he took air back into his lungs. I don't remember. Naruto spoke in a somewhat angry voice. Any of you asking the Nara, Akimichi, Yamanaka or Inuzuka clans to spread their techniques out to everyone when they made them? No, they kept their techniques and passed them down to their family members. I intend to do the same. Tsunade watched Naruto as he stood up to the council. She had learned yesterday that while most Jedi forbid the use of dark side techniques, saying that they led to the dark side or whatever the hell it was, Revan had taught him the techniques anyway, stating that it's not the power that's evil, but what you use it for that counts. She felt somewhat proud that he could effectively put some of the more presumptuous people in their place. But she did not miss the small flicker of satisfaction in his eyes as he shut the annoying councilman up. She herself admitted that she too had felt satisfaction, but still from what he had explained of the light and dark sides, the dark side was ruled by negative emotion and cruelty, and acts of such could lead one to fall, as he had put it. Perhaps this new freedom of being able to use his abilities in the open would be too much for him to handle. She'd have to keep an eye on him. The tension in the room was so thick you couldn't cut it with a chainsaw. Finally it was broken by Hayashi. Very well, Naruto-san has made his point. It appears we now have 2 orders of business, recording your techniques and naming the Uzumaki as an official shinobi clan of Konoha. While normally Hayashi would not care about the boy, he had earned some measure of respect. An orphan growing up with nothing and no one, now had abilities that were now going to turn him into the founder of the 6th clan of Konoha. Not counting the late Uchiha clan. Indeed, the boy deserved at least some respect for that accomplishment. While there were some murmurs of disagreement, the matter was soon settled, as not many wanted to oppose the Hyuga clan head. Meanwhile, an entire galaxy away. He was known by many as Mandalore, leader of the Mandalorian clans. But to a great few he was known simply as Canderous Ordo, warrior, follower, companion and loyal friend to fallen Jedi Revan. They met towards the end of what is now known as the Jedi Civil War. He was working as a hired thug, she was a Republic scout trying to get off planet, and things just fell into place from there. He watched her in battle, the fierceness she displayed against their opponents, the tenacity she demonstrated to protect them, and the unwavering motivation to win against everyone and everything that stood in her way. Even the Dark Lord of the Sith was no match for her. She would always come to him when she needed help, either for combat techniques or simple boredom. he grew to care for her. It was a relationship he would define as that of a rookie soldier with a war veteran. She had done that with all of them to one degree or another. Mission, the young Twi'lek street urchin, had become her little sister. To Yuhani, a Cathar Jedi guardian, she became a mentor, a guide, and an inspiration. To Zalber, a Wookiee exile, she went from being his master through life debt to being his friend and ally. To Bastila, she was a rival, and yet, even in the end, they had both helped each other. To Karth, she was a sympathetic shoulder to cry on, and while their relationship could have moved further, they never acted on it. To Jolee, she became a granddaughter, and he became a grandfather to her. She was someone he could trust, and he was one of the few she ever sought the approval of. And he was her soldier, and she was his general. It had been he who helped her reach the edges of the outer rim without alerting the others. And there, at the edge, staring into that black endless void, she had given him his last orders before she vanished forever into the inky blackness. Restore your people, Canderous. Bring back the Mandalorians from the ruins of Malakar V. The galaxy will need their strength very soon. I will need them very soon. He had kept that promise, and the Mandalorian clans were now united again because of it. United under one banner, his. And indeed the Republic had needed them shortly afterwards. They were the unsung heroes of the battle for Telos. He had led his people along with a Jedi exiled deep into the enemy's flagship, the Ravager, where they defeated a man many claimed could never be killed, Darth Nihilus. Shortly afterwards, the Jedi exile had two left for the Outer Rim, and his companions had dispersed. Only one of the exile's companions remained with him. -47 Hong Kong dollars, Revan's old assassin droid. Even though he was an experienced war veteran with dozens of battles under his belt, nothing could have prepared him for the sight that greeted him when he woke up. Revan stood in front of him, her form seemingly unchanged from the last 2 decades or so. She was glowing, a faint blue glow. He stood slowly, his mouth hanging slightly open in shock. It had been 20-some-odd years since he'd seen her, and suddenly she shows up in his bedroom no less, and how in the hell did she get past the security? She smiled at him, and he found himself smiling back, or smirking really, but hey. It's good to see you again, Canderous. She spoke, smiling softly at him, her voice as soothing and calm as always. She began looking around the room, her eyes holding a strange melancholy. I see you have done what I asked? He reached forward to place his hand on her shoulder but gasped when his arm went straight through her, and at once it dawned on him. She wasn't real, she was just contacting him through the Force. She sighed as she noticed his disappointed expression, but spoke anyway. Canderous, do you remember why I left? He visibly straightened, crossing his arms before replying. You said you went to fight the true enemy, but you never specified who, what, or where this enemy is. She nodded. I know. She locked eyes with him again, this time, her eyes sad and apologetic. I went to face the Sith, the true Sith beyond the Rim, who fought on a scale with the Force that to this day I wonder how I overcame them. Kendra said nothing to that. He had a feeling from the very beginning that's what she would have faced. She broke his gaze and looked to the floor. I managed to win, but I still need your help. He raised an eyebrow in silent questioning. She never asked for help before, not even when she faced Malak alone, so he knew that this was very dangerous. He couldn't wait. My men and I are ready to fight and defend the Republic at a mere moment's notice. You need only ask. He spoke with force. It was his own way of comforting her. She shook her head and smiled at him again. No, Canderous, this fight is not to defend the Republic. This is a personal favor, and it has a lot of risk for both you and your clansmen. He smirked. Revan, what did I say when your true identity was revealed to us? She smiled. You were the only one in the galaxy that could ever best the Mandalorians. I'm your soldier until the end, Revan, no matter how it plays out. And that still stands now, Revan. What do you need from me and my clan? She smiled gratefully, her eyes shining with her gratitude. I need you to help my son. News spread quickly, almost like a wildfire across a dry plain, or a plague. Practically overnight after the council meeting, most if not all of the village knew that Naruto now had abilities that had led the council to label his name as the new shinobi clan of Konoha. No one really knew how word spread so fast, Yamanaka Inikov, but as Naruto walked down the street he couldn't help but notice the many glances the people sent his way. Some of wariness, others of appraisal, but most of simple curiosity. At first he wondered just why he was getting so much attention, then as everyone in the street kept on staring he began getting nervous and decided to take to the rooftops to head to the tower. As soon as his blonde-covered head peeked over the edges of the buildings he felt someone latch onto his collar and yank him in another direction. When he cleared the cobwebs and brought the world back into focus, he came face to face with a pair of clear blue eyes. Is it true? He pulled back and realized exactly who this was. Ino? She shook him again, the smile on her face growing even more, threatening to split her face in two. Come on, Naruto, tell me if it's true. Is what true? He finally yelled as he began to get some whiplash from the constant shaking. Is it true that you founded a clan? She said, lowering the volume a bit, as she realized she had been yelling almost to the top of her lungs. Was his intelligent reply. I guess so, he said after a minute. Her smile grew even bigger, if that was at all possible, and she refrained from squalling like a schoolgirl. This is so cool. I can't believe I'm friends with someone that founded a clan. Naruto smiled, somewhere between amused, sheepish, and embarrassed as he scratched the back of his head. Well, I guess it's kinda cool. You have to show us these techniques sometime later, she said, placing an arm around his shoulders. He scratched his cheek a little uncertainly. But isn't a ninja supposed to keep their techniques a secret? She looked at him as if he had sprouted a second head. Who are you and what the hell have you done with Naruto? Hey! He cried out indignantly as he straightened. What the hell is that supposed to mean? PFT. She scoffed, removing her arm from around his shoulder and glaring at him as she crossed her arms. Your Naruto, the guy Shikamaru said, was practically bouncing up and down on the balls of his feet to show off some move you learned after the Chunin exam, Rasen, whatever the hell it was, and now you're saying you don't want to show off some techniques that got to the position of practically clan head. He had that stupid look on his face, you know, the look you get when someone points out the obvious, and you don't even have the smallest comeback in mind, and you desperately want to say something to dispute what she just said. He settled for huffing and crossing his arms indignantly. Yeah, whatever. Sakura saw a few of them. If you want, you can ask her about it later. Right now I need to go see Bachan. She could have sworn she heard him mutter something about old ladies not knowing when to leave someone's sleep, but shrugged it off as she frowned. You really should treat the Hokage with more respect. He snorted and she shook her head before the smile returned to her features. Anyway, congrats Naruto, I gotta go meet my team, but I just had to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, she said as she jumped up to the roof, giving a small goodbye wave. She took off. Naruto scratched his cheek with a somewhat nervous look on his face. This is gonna be really weird for the first few days, he muttered to himself before continuing on his way to the tower. As he arrived, he caught sight of Tsunade's raven-haired assistant. Shizen-ichan! He yelled, smiling like a fool as he ran up to her. She turned and returned his smile with one of her own. Hello Naruto-kun, Tsunade-sama was expecting you. He noticed a package under her arm and pointed to it. Naeni, Shizen-ichan, what's with the box? She leaned in and whispered in his ear. Tsunade-sama asked me to get some old medical scrolls from the files, real powerful ones too. But she didn't tell me why and asked me to keep it a secret from everyone but you. When she pulled back, she saw his curious expression quickly turn into a wide smile as he looked up to Tsunade's office. I appreciate this, Bachan. But Rin-ne-chan and Sarutobi-ji have already tried everything. He was snapped out of his thoughts as a hand waved in front of his face, and the sound of his name being called reached his ears. Naruto. Huh? He said so very eloquently. You spaced out for a minute, are you feeling well? She asked with a concerned frown. He smiled again and nodded. Yeah, I just thought of something I had to tell Bachan. Anyway, I'll talk to you later, Ne-chan, he said, waving as he walked into the tower. So it was no surprise that the sound of a door being kicked open, a loud cry of Bie-chan, and then the sound of a body crashing through several walls reached the ears of all those within range. Why do all the women I meet tend to hit me? Naruto whined a few minutes later, as he rubbed his sore cheek. Tsunade snorted as she leaned back in her chair. Because you have a nasty tendency to either piss us off or catch us in the wrong mood. Now she reached over and tossed the scroll she grabbed from her desk. The council has decided to test and see how your new abilities will hold up in practical situations. We've chosen 3 B-rank missions, one specializing in infiltration, another in active combat, and another interrogation. Your first mission is the infiltration mission. He read over the scroll as she spoke. Apparently Wave was having trouble with remnants of the Gato Company. The remnants had been stocking up on mercenaries and resources, and there were even some unconfirmed reports that they had 2 Chunin Nuke under their payroll. So their job was to go in, determine the enemy numbers, and if possible take out their boss. Naruto frowned. But what about Sasuke and Orochimaru and even Akatsuki? Don't you think they'll attack me while I'm so far away from the village? Tsunade nodded. Akatsuki is a threat, however there's a reason I've chosen you for this mission. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her desk. We've gotten some reports that there might be a sound base located near Wave Country or in one of the islands surrounding it. Your secondary objective is to find this base. If you get confirmation, you are not to engage. At his unhappy frown, she spoke in a dangerous tone. You are not to engage, simply bring the information back here. Do you understand, Naruto? At his nod, Tough still frowning, she leaned back in her chair again. Good, your team should be arriving soon. She was cut off as the door burst open, revealing. Move it, I want all this stuff loaded up on the ship in 2 hours. Such was the voice of Mandalore, as he watched his men scurry on and off an old Mandalorian supply freighter they had salvaged from the war. It was a relatively small ship compared to most war-going ships. With enough room to comfortably fit 75 men and over 700 pounds of supplies, including weapons, medical equipment and food, it had not been at all easy to obtain and even less to keep it hidden. But he had managed, and now it was going to serve its people again after so many years. He looked over to Zuka, his technical expert. Zuka, how long do you estimate our trip to be? Well, judging by these hyperspace routes and coordinates you've given us, it should take us about 2.5 to 3 weeks to arrive. But sir, are you certain these are accurate? One long step and we could end up lost forever. Are you questioning me, Zuka? The Mandalorian Lord spoke dangerously as he turned to him. And no, Mandalore, sir. Zuka stuttered out, backing up as he did so. Good. Now go and lock those coordinates in the computer. Yes, sir, Zuka said before he turned to do his job. The Mandalorian leader watched as another recruit approached him. Blue armor glinting in the Dushuan sun. Mandalore, sir, the scouts found someone, a Jedi. It seems he's an old man requesting to see you. Mandalore turned to face the young Mandalorian fully. Though his eyebrow was raised, no one could tell from behind the visor of his helmet. Is he an old man with a gray beard and no hair, kind of 5'8" height, has a brown cloak with a hood on and a blindfold over his eyes? Yes, sir. How did you know? Because he's standing right behind you. The young recruit spun around and came face to face with the smiling visage of an old black man. He seemed to be near his 80s or perhaps even older. Yet the air around him was one of power and kindness. Still the show-off, I see, Canderous. The old man spoke, smiling, ignoring the surprised gasps of the recruit. How dare you? You are to treat Mandalore with respect. PFT. The old man scoffed, walking past the recruit and the Mandalorian leader as he looked up to the ship. I see you've been doing quite well for yourself. What are you doing here, Jolie? Better yet, how the hell did you find me? Mandalore spoke as he waved off the recruit and turned to look at the older man. Well, not to sound like those snobbish masters, but I felt a disturbance in the Force. I felt Revan. Shit. The Mandalorian cursed. Alright boys, get your asses in gear. I want this thing loaded up in 1 hour instead of 2. What's the rush, Canderous? Jolie spoke lazily as he sat down on a nearby rock. If your senile old ass was able to find me from whatever backwater planet you were hiding on this time, then it can't be long before I have every other Jedi and their mothers coming to this place. Oh, you have little to worry about. The backwater planet I was hiding on just happens to be about 70 miles north of your base. Canderous paused. You were hiding on Dushuan? Just what the hell have my patrols been doing? Oh, get off it. The old Jedi waved him off. Don't think me so old that I can't stay hidden from a few young ones still wet behind the ears. He scoffed as he crossed his arms. Jolie eyed a deactivated hunter-killer droid, a rust-red one, as they wheeled it up the ramp. Please tell me you're not bringing that crazy droid with us? Canderous shrugged. Revan liked him, and she'll be happy to see him again. Jolie stood and settled himself next to him, overseeing the rest of the Mandalorians as they worked. So where are we going? We? Yes, we, damn it. The old man snapped. I know for a fact that wherever you're going, Revan will be there. Life has turned dull without her around. I'm gonna go with you to go get her? I'm not going to go get her, I'm going to help her. Well, helping her will allow her to sooner solve whatever problem needs solving, and the sooner whatever problem needs solving gets solved, the sooner she can come back, because she will be free of the unsolved problem because it's solved, and so we're helping bringing her back. A slight pause. She won't be coming back. Then why does she need your help? She needs me to help protect her son. I see. Wait, her what? God damn it, why the hell couldn't those rumors spread after I left? Naruto found himself repeating these lines more and more with each passing moment as he walked further and further away from Konoha towards Wave Country, his new teammates for this mission, namely Neji, Lee and Tenten, walking next to him. Since this mission was an infiltration/assassination mission, this team was the most well-balanced for it. Niji could easily scout out the enemy with his Byakugan, Tenten could snipe them with her weapons, Lee was the heavy hitter in case things got ugly, and he was the wild card. However, just like the rest of Konoha, they too had heard the various rumors about his new abilities and were currently hounding him for explanations, demonstrations, and/or answers. But goddammit, there was a reason he had kept those things a secret for so many years. He couldn't remember why exactly at the moment, but he knew there was one. He sighed as he slumped forward. Before he looked at his teammates, with a slightly irritated expression. Naruto-kun! Lee cried exuberantly for like what seemed to be the 200th time that hour. You must demonstrate some of these new abilities. Your flames of youth demand it. They're not really new. He grumbled silently to himself. I must admit, Naruto, these abilities were the topic of conversation around Heishi for well over 5 hours in the Hyuga household, so I too would like to see some of these abilities. Niji spoke up, for once in agreement with his exuberant teammate. He sighed and looked to Tenten, who was merely walking along staring at the road ahead of her. Aren't you gonna add anything to this? No, she said simply. Naruto smiled, thinking that finally someone had looked up the definition of the word privacy. The smile quickly died, however, on her next sentence. With those two on your ass, you'll cave in eventually, so there's no need. I admit Lee-kun isn't as effective without Gai-sensei around, but he's pretty good on his own. Naruto was about to say something to her when the mentioned eyebrowed, leotard-wearing green beast monstrosity appeared in front of his face with small rivers of tears running down his eyes. Naruto saw his lips move to form words that he had little doubt would be yelled in the loudest, most excited voice any had ever heard. Not wanting to lose his eardrums, those were a real pain in the ass to heal, he noticed a few hours ago. He held up his hands in a warning gesture. Stop! He yelled, causing Lee to, quite literally, freeze mid-motion. His lips still half forming the words, his body frozen just before he hit one of his poses, eyes wide, and even the river of tears seemed to freeze upon his face. Naruto looked around and saw Tenten's smug smile. Stupid bun-haired girl. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the lightsaber. He had already showed it to Sakura Yamato and Sai, so this should hold off their curiosity for a while. Lee, Tenten, and Niji looked at the strange cylindrical device oddly for a moment before Naruto brought the purple beam to life with the flick of a button, causing them all to jump back rather startled. This is called a lightsaber. It can cut through anything. I made it, and this is one of the things that helped me hold off Orochimaru during my last mission. He lazily tossed the kunai into the air, and with a quick slash the strong knife was cut in half with no difficulty. Despite the fact that he would have preferred to keep these techniques and weapons a secret, old habits apparently die hard, he could not help but smirk at their expressions. Lee held a look of complete and total astonishment and wonder. Niji showed no outward reaction, but the appraisal look in his eyes gave away his slight surprise and Tenten. Naruto backed away very slowly from the bun-haired girl. She had hearts in her eyes, her hands clasped together beneath her chin, and sparkly stuff was glittering in front of her features. Tenten, are you okay? He questioned uncertainly, backing up some more from the bun-haired weapon mistress. I want one. She spoke dazedly, almost as if she was in some kind of trance. Reaching out with her hands, she moved to grab the futuristic weapon. Damn it! Niji cursed. Lee! Right. The green-clad genin leaped forward and suddenly had Tenten held in a full Nelson. Tenten-chan! Remember what the therapist said, you don't need every weapon in the world. You don't need to. He was cut off as the girl broke free from his hold and elbowed him in the gut before flipping him over her shoulder before she advanced on Naruto again. She would have continued on her path when Lee grabbed her by the ankle and yanked her feet out from under her before pinning her down to the floor. Get off me, Lee! I cannot, Tenten-chan. I will dampen my flames of youth if I do so. To hell with your youth. Naruto looked at the odd scene before him as Tenten punched, kicked, scratched, and bit her teammate in her struggles to escape his hold before he looked to the stoic Hyuga at his side. Aren't you gonna help him? Niji simply shrugged. No, this is nothing compared to when she first saw a special 50 off sale on special light-absorbing kunai with a diamond-sharpened edge. He shuddered slightly at that memory, though he struggled to hide it. Naruto turned back, watching his Tenten kick Lee in the shin, making the boy wince in pain. May I see it, Naruto? The blonde boy was snapped out of his morbid fascination at the beating Lee could take, and the damage the girl could dish out with her fingernails alone at the sound of Niji's voice. Huh? May I see the lightsaber? He worded a little uncertainly before continuing. It is a fascinating weapon. I admit I would like to see how well balanced it is. Naruto smiled, loosing a little of his reservations about showing his new skills. Sure, before he handed the double-bladed weapon to the Hyuga prodigy. Whatever you do though, don't touch the blade under any circumstances. Neji nodded before he gingerly gripped the hilt of the double-bladed weapon. He weighed it in his hand, giving an approving nod before he looked to Naruto. May I? The blonde made a dismissive gesture with his hand, giving his permission to the stoic Hyuga branch member. Neji nodded before he stepped back and began to perform one of the basic kata he had seen Tenten use a few times with some of her staff weapons. He had to admit the weapon was a marvel in itself. Naruto said he created it? He doubted it. He was not saying that it was impossible for Naruto to create something like this. Neji would never again say it was impossible for Naruto to do anything he put his mind to. Still, it was hard for anyone to believe that the blonde could create such a sophisticated weapon. It used no chakra, was extremely light due to the fact that the bladed part of this weapon weighed absolutely nothing, and it could be hidden just as easily as a kunai or a large dagger. The soft hum the weapon gave off with each swing was almost a lull as he twirled the weapon over his head and finished his small experimentation with a satisfied nod before he pressed the buttons on the weapon, retracting the purple blades with a strange, but strangely fitting sound before he turned back to his teammates. The sight that greeted him, however, was quite strange. Lee and Tenten had stopped fighting, and they, along with Naruto, were now looking at him with this look. 0-0. Yes, that look. The look that immediately told you something was no longer right with you or something very bad was standing behind him. He sneaked a peek behind him and found nothing before he looked back to his teammates, who were still looking at him with that same look of complete and utter shock/dread. Naruto began hesitantly. Neji actually saw him visibly swallow the lump in his throat before he extended his hand to grab the deactivated lightsaber. That was a good Neji, really good, he said, backing away slowly back to his two teammates who were still staring at him with that weird look on their faces. After almost a full minute of their staring, Neji began getting irritated and a little nervous. What? He snapped angrily, making the three jump back before Naruto began to stutter out a sentence. Neji, I don't know how to say this, but he trailed off, averting his eyes from the Hyuga genius. Neji snarled at his avoiding the subject and was about to demand his answers when a softly muttered word from Tenten stopped him dead in his tracks. Your hair. Neji paused and turned to Tenten, who held out the flat side of one of her knives, using it as a makeshift mirror so the Hyuga could see himself. At the sight that greeted his pupil-less eyes, Neji's mouth opened slightly in utter shock, which quickly morphed into horror. His hair, the raven black hair he had been letting grow out for a decent number of years, was completely cut off. It was now so short, it actually in a strange way faintly resembled Lee and Guy's bowl-cut style ha. Neji snapped his attention to Lee, who now had the biggest smile on his face, and his eyes held stars in them as he reached into one of his back pouches. Neji began backing away, holding his hands in front of himself in a warding gesture. Lee, don't do it. He took out another set of green tights, causing Neji to back away even more. Don't you dare come at me with that thing, Lee, Neji warned, some of his features betraying his nervousness at the latest development. Neji. Lee spoke in a sort of zombified state. We must kindle the flames of your youth. You are now going to become the third green beast, Lee yelled, lunging at him. Neji raised his foot and slammed it into Lee's face. Get away from me, he yelled before he turned and ran as Lee bounced back on his feet, undeterred as he chased the now short-haired Hyuga prodigy. Ah hell! Tenten groaned as she took out two kunai with some wire attached to them and began running after her two teammates. Naruto watched as the three ran into the trees with a weirded-out expression on his face, before he simply began laughing hysterically. It was just so absurd, one of the strongest teams Konoha had to offer, and who knew they had so many absurd little quirks. Wait for me. He managed to get out through a few of his laughs before he began chasing after them. Luckily Neji had enough sense to run towards Wave, so they weren't taking any detours. Naruto cursed as the blade of a kunai grazed his right shoulder. The hum of the lightsaber continued its soft melody as it flashed to and fro before his eyes, deflecting more of the dark projectiles Tenten continually rained down on him in a seemingly endless barrage. His other two teammates for this mission, Lee and Neji, though with his hair pulled back into a small ponytail to keep it from falling and thus begin another of Lee's little recruiting episodes, sat a small distance away. They had convinced him that in order to properly categorize his new fighting style and acquired abilities into a plan, that they would have to see at least the bare basics of what he could do and what his weapon could do. Naruto had an inkling that half of their long confusing explanation was utter bullshit. And as another kunai grazed his cheek, he was thoroughly convinced of it. He had never done this before. By use of the force he could more or less tell where Tenten was gonna throw, which led him to be able to block about half of them on its own because of lack of practice in the lightsaber deflecting field, as he had decided to call it. He wasn't half as efficient as another Padawan or Jedi would be with it at this point in their training, but add to that his ninja training and reflexes and he could block or dodge almost all of them. But there were just so many that some got through and continued to nick and slice his arms, legs, face, and one even lodged itself in his shoulder at one point. Now Naruto had a fairly high tolerance for pain, but the small stings and burning sensations he felt during the healing were starting to get annoying. Not to mention that his clothes were starting to look as if they had been thrown into a machine that was a cross between a washing machine and a blender. Oh, how Lee and Niji were gonna pay for this. The purple beam flashed across his face before he cut another kunai away, deflecting the projectile with relative ease as he spun the double-bladed weapon in time to cut off 3 others. But he missed a 4th, hiding in the shadow of another, and the kunai sliced deeply into the back of his hand. The sudden pain caused him to instinctively release his grip on the futuristic weapon and jerk his hand back, letting it fall to the floor, dissipating with its unique sound as it fell. Naruto reached to call the blade back to his uninjured left hand when he saw 2 more kunai approaching. Leaping away with one good leap back into a tree and watched as Tenten opened one of her scrolls. If he thought she had a great deal of weapons before, he should have waited to see this. Quite literally hundreds of weapons began moving towards him at great speeds. He wouldn't be able to stop them even with a lightsaber. He could have used Kawarimi, but he decided again to show off some. Letting his signature smirk spread over his features, he extended his hands forward and the entire group watched in open amazement as Tenten's weapons suddenly came to a screeching halt in midair, floating for a good 5 seconds before Naruto's hands fell, allowing the rain of metal to clatter noisily to the forest floor. Watching in smug satisfaction as Tenten continued to gape openly at the scene, as did Lee. Though his visible reaction was much more humorous as he waved around frantically with his hands gesturing to the air, and the kunai on the floor that had previously been held floating in the aforementioned area. Niji again composed his features, though Naruto did notice the astonishment that peeked through every now and then. He had noticed, however, the faint smoke-like substance that had extended from Naruto's hands and held the kunai in place with his Byakugan. It wasn't chakra, it didn't even seem remotely similar in nature. To create a non-chakra-based technique but with an apparently alternate source of power, if Naruto was indeed responsible for creating such a technique, then he was possibly one, if not the greatest genius to be born onto the ninja world in over a century. He cleared his head of those thoughts, though. Naruto had shown him some of the abilities that they wished to see for themselves for their own curiosity, and for tactical purposes. Now he knew that Naruto's skills with that lightsaber could be quite effective against long-range oriented individuals and close-range ones because of the nature of the blade itself. He could be so bold as to classify it as a form of ultimate defense, but like Gaara's it had one flaw: if Naruto was too slow to react, the defense was broken. He doubted, however, that they would encounter anyone fast or strong enough to get the better of Naruto during this mission. Especially with whatever other hidden skills Naruto had. At least Niji hoped he had some hidden skills. If he had shown them all he could do, then that was quite foolish on his part. Lee and Tenten continued to stare for a while, as Naruto held up a watch to time their recovery rate. He had done the same with Erosenin, who had taken almost a full 2 minutes to scrape his jaw off the floor long enough to form a coherent sentence after he had used the mind trick to convince an IWA Umbu that they were not trespassing on their borders to spy on them. They were, but that's besides the point. Lee and Tenten were approaching the 1-minute marker when suddenly Lee leapt high into the air with a loud cry of YOSH. When he landed, he pointed dramatically at Naruto with fire shooting out of his eyes. "Naruto-kun, I have figured out your technique." Niji and Tenten turned their heads so sharply at the green-clad genin Naruto heard audible cracks as their eyes widened in absolute bafflement. Lee took on a thinking pose as he began to explain. "As we all saw, Naruto-kun stopped all of the weapons, but we didn't see him move. Therefore there is only one logical explanation. Naruto has developed a technique that does not use chakra but a new form of energy that has similar properties of telekinesis, and used this new telekinetic energy to stop the weapons. That is Naruto-kun's new abilities." Naruto stared completely slack-jawed at the sight. While some force abilities were not categorized as telekinesis, some such as the one he used just now were closely related, or maybe even fell in the telekinetic category. Just as Lee had explained. Lee had actually sorta kinda figured it out. His thoughts were brought to a screeching halt as Niji and Tenten spoke. "Lee." Niji sighed as he rubbed his forehead. "Telekinesis is a myth. It's never even proven that it exists. Naruto couldn't have unlocked it, much less applied it to such a good defensive technique. No offense, Naruto." "None taken," Naruto said, sweat dropping as Niji shot down the closest explanation anyone had come up with so far. Lee slumped as chibi tears began flowing down his eyes. Tenten patted him gently on the back. It's okay, Lee, it's okay, she said soothingly as Lee sniffled. Naruto watched the three with one massive sweat drop going down the side of his head. If he was gonna learn anything from this mission, it would be this. Guy's team was weird. The first rays of the morning light greeted the four-man team as they leapt from tree to tree on their way to Wave Country. The orange light filtering down through the thick canopy lightly illuminating their path, as Lee took up the front followed by Naruto, Tenten and Neji. They traveled in silence, as was standard procedure for shinobi travel, as they needed to remain stealthy. But as we all know, Naruto is anything but. Neji, are we there yet? The blonde whined for the fourth time in the last 20 minutes as his stomach gave yet another long growl. They hadn't eaten that morning, the rest of the team having chosen to get a move on to arrive at Wave as soon as possible. Both to save time, and because Tenten said that Wave was rumored to have some of the best seafood anyone could find anywhere, and that she wanted to try it. Neji gritted his teeth so hard he swore one of them was gonna chip. This was the jackass he had been considering to be the greatest ninja genius in over a century just the other night. Just what the fuck was in that soup he ate before he left for the mission? Did he get hit in the head? Maybe it was all that training with the Byakugan, it was after all very close to his brain. Maybe he had used it too much, and that messed up his thought patterns or something. No, Naruto, we are not there yet, the Hyuga prodigy ground out as he leapt off another tree with a grunt. But I'm bored and hungry. Neji got real red in the face, as he glared at Naruto with all the considerable annoyance and anger he could muster within his body. Naruto could have sworn that his Byakugan actually turned red for a moment, and immediately looked ahead of him, ignoring the Hyuga's eyes burning a hole into the back of his neck. Just then Lee spoke up. Naruto-kun, in order to fight off the boredom that will dampen your flames of youth, you must do what I do. Naruto seemed to perk up at that, anything to keep himself away from the hell that was boredom. What's that, Lee? Lee smiled. It is simple, my youthful comrade. Lee smiled, momentarily blinding a bird in the distance, causing it to fly straight into a tree and break its own neck. You must count the trees we pass by. Naruto, Neji, and Tenten all slowly looked to Lee as if he was even more nuts than usual. Lee smiled, completely oblivious to the meaning of his comrades' gazes and interpreting them in his own mind. Yes, I know it is a brilliant way to increase your mental capacities and practice on focusing on many things at once. Again the three just stared. Observe, Lee cried before looking ahead. A few seconds passed before he took a deep breath before he began rapidly pointing at different trees in all directions and yelling out the numbers. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 1 0 1 1 1 2 1 3 1 4 1 5 1 6 1 7 1 8 1 9 2 0 2 1 2 2 2 3 2 4 2 5 2 6 2 7 2 8 2 9 3 0. And so the team observed their teammate, who had now thoroughly convinced them that both he and possibly his older clone needed to see the good people with needles, long white coats, and fancy jackets for their patients. Naruto sighed again. Since he was damn sure not gonna fight off boredom with Lee's method, he decided to try a different approach. Conversation. Looking back, he saw Tenten a little behind him. Slowing his pace a bit, he appeared beside her and quickly fell into step, watching as she looked to him with a slightly curious look in her eyes. What's up, Naruto? She questioned as they kept on jumping through the trees. He smiled, scratching the back of his head in a sheepish manner. Well, I'm bored, so I decided to come back here and talk to you. Her curious expression was quickly replaced by one of annoyance and affront. Oh, so I'm kinda like your last resort, huh? Thanks a lot, Naruto. Humph. She huffs as she looks away in anger, and Naruto's sheepish expression was replaced by one of panic. He knew firsthand that a pissed-off woman usually ended with him losing brain cells due to fists hitting his head. Tenten, he cried, panicking somewhat. Come on, I didn't mean it like that, really. Please don't be mad. As he was beginning to really get desperate, he heard her giggling as she turned to face him. It's okay, Naruto, I was just kidding. I understand, I do travel with these two all the time, she said, gesturing to Neji and Lee, the first looking as stoic as ever as the second continued his tree-counting thingy. Naruto smiled in relief. Oh good, it'll be hell traveling on this mission if you're pissed at me. That would just leave me with Neji and Lee to talk to. She smiled and nodded in agreement. Lee, watch where you're going, she called to the green-clad ninja as he came close to crashing into a tree. So, he began a bit hesitantly, not exactly knowing what to say. Finally the question came to him. So why do you like weapons so much? I mean, no offense, but weapons aren't that great compared to jutsu. She shrugged. That's your point of view. But jutsu are just too flashy. Why go through all the theatrics when a weapon, if wielded correctly, can do the same thing in a much cleaner and less tiring fashion? Naruto shrugged. I guess, but if you're ever against a wind user like Temari, you're gonna have problems again. Tenten's expression immediately darkened as she remembered her humiliating defeat at the wind mistress's hands. Yeah, well, just because I like weapons doesn't mean I haven't learned from my mistakes. I've studied a few techniques that can help me, as well as some counter techniques against wind users. At that, Naruto raised an eyebrow. Really? At that, Tenten just grinned before she yelled out. Lee, would you please watch where the hell you going? The slight annoyance and hints of worry were detectable in her voice. Naruto was about to say something else when Tenten spoke again. Besides, there's no better feeling than the one you get when a kunai knife just slices its way into an enemy ninja's flesh. Naruto raised a single eyebrow in puzzlement to what he heard. Huh? Tenten's smile turned to him, one that was strangely innocent, but extremely creepy. Yeah. She sighed as she took out a kunai. These babies are the best, light, easy to throw, they can cut through tendons, muscle, cartilage, and even bones. I remember I once saw the marrow leaking out through one of the injuries. Her smile took on a dreamy-like state as she sighed, apparently remembering something interesting from her past. Naruto could only think two things. The first is that her and the pieces of cutlery should get a room, and the second was that Guy's team was entirely consistent of freaks. It didn't matter if they wore green spandex or not. They were all crazy. Lee, watch. Crash. Out. Yup, Naruto was certain of his assessment of the team now. It was 2 hours later at around 10 in the morning did the team find themselves finally having crossed the Great Bridge, whose name had placed a smile that still refused to leave Naruto's features, as well as several incredulous/confused stares from his teammates. Though Naruto knew that the bridge and the elimination of Gato would help the country, he never could have imagined the complete 180 change it had taken. Once desolate streets crowded with homeless, sick and miserable villagers who went about their days with a gloom and a visible aura of resignation, were now teeming with life. Merchants of all kinds lined the streets showcasing their goods. People actually smiled now as they walked the streets. It was a welcome change, and one that made him swell up with pride that he had helped accomplish this. He was broken from his thoughts soon enough, however. All right. Neji spoke, scratching the back of his head as he stretched, eliciting several cracks from his spine. Let's find the mayor, Tazuna. He's the one who hired us. Tazuna's the mayor of this place now? Naruto said excitedly as he rounded back on Neji, causing the Hyuga prodigy to raise a questioning eyebrow. You know him? Of course, Tsuna's the dumb drunk that built the bridge. That was my first mission, to protect him as he built it. Neji nodded. I see. Still, why did he name the bridge after you specifically, and not the team? Naruto shrugged. Beats me. That's not important now, right? Tenten cut in from her place next to them. Since Naruto already knows the guy, then he can get things running easier. Neji nodded. Very well, let's start making our way to City Hall then. This Tazuna person should be there. Yeah, right, old drunk's probably sleeping. Wave City Hall was, for lack of a better word, messy. Piles upon piles of files and paperwork lined up around the walls in huge stacks. Upon closer inspection, it revealed that these were all different contracts for trade agreements and business setups, and basically the entire economy of Wave Country. Ignoring the mess, Neji walked to the secretary's desk and spoke in a flat, yet somewhat polite tone. Excuse me, miss, we are the ninja from Konoha. Tazuna-san has requested. The woman looked up, noticing their forehead protectors, and nodded. I see, verification papers please. Removing a small scroll from his pocket, Neji unrolled it, revealing a contract with the Hokage's seal on it. Nodding again in satisfaction, the woman pressed a button on the intercom. Tazuna-san, the ninja have just arrived from Konoha. Receiving no reply, the woman sighed as if expecting this and looked to the ninja. Just go on through, he's not meeting anyone. The four nodded before they made their way down the hall, Naruto's anticipation of seeing the old drunk again growing along with his smile. He sped up, moving in front of the group. He gripped the doorknob and opened the door, not entirely surprised to find Tazuna sleeping on his desk with a bottle of sake in one hand, a pen loosely held in the other as drool fell from his parted lips onto a document. Most likely an important one. At the sight, Naruto was reminded quite acutely of their own leader back home. And oh, the MPHly was silenced quite acutely by Naruto, who covered his mouth with his hand, gesturing for silence. The others watched confused as he got a big smile on his face and walked up to the sleeping Tazuna. Before he yelled into his ears, "Hey, old man!" at the top of his powerful lungs, causing the old bridge builder to scream as he jumped up, flailing his arms around, spilling sake everywhere as he toppled over from his chair, crashing onto the floor in a heap. He sputtered angrily as he heard Naruto snickering. He shot to his feet and threw the sake bottle at the blonde's head, scoring a direct hit, which stopped the blonde's laughter as the bottle shattered over his head, drenching him in sake. You stupid brat. Whatever joy Tazuna may have had over the blonde ninja's presence was clearly gone due to the rude wake-up. What the hell was that for? Naruto yelled angrily as he stood up. That was for waking me up like that. You shouldn't have been sleeping on the job in the first place, you drunken bastard. Why, you little shit? From out of nowhere, Tazuna drew another sake bottle and busted it over Naruto's head again, drenching him in even more of the alcoholic liquid as well as knocking him out. The bridge builder cleared his throat, straightened out his suit, and dusted himself off before turning to the rest of the group with a smile on his face. Welcome, you must be the ninja I requested from Konoha. Evenly sweat dropped. Niji cleared his throat before replying. Yes, we are Tazuna-san. Good, good, Tazuna said as he sat down and looked at them. Well, as the mission report stated, we are having some trouble with the remnants of the Gato Company. At first it was minor trouble, a few hassled merchants and threatened businesses here and there, nothing our police force couldn't handle. Lately, however, they're getting bolder. Attacking merchants out on the street in broad daylight, hassling them for protection money and the like. He reached into his desk and pulled out a file. Our Coast Guard has seen several merc ships around the small northern islands. That area is not in our jurisdiction, so we can't conduct an official search. But we do know that area is where Gata's headquarters was at one point, so we have good reason to believe that it is indeed a forceful takeover of Wave that they might be planning. Niji nodded. You also stated in your report that they may have ninja working for them. Tazuna nodded. Unconfirmed rumors, really. You still can't get the story straight, old man? Didn't you learn the first time how many headaches that can bring? Naruto sked from his corner of the room, completely dry as he stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head in a disapproving manner. Shut up, brat, he said dismissively as he brought out another bottle of sake and started drinking. Tazuna-san, as the leader of your village, it is most unyouthful to consume alcohol while performing your political duties. Lee finally spoke up as he appeared next to Tazuna and plucked the bottle out of his hands. Walking over to the window, he opened it and swiftly threw the alcoholic beverage with all his might. He turned around only to be greeted by Zabuza putting another bottle to his lips. Whatever, kid. Tenten slapped her forehead. Lee's right, you know you shouldn't drink on the job. Oh, cut the old man some slack, Naruto cut in. Besides, Bachan does the same thing back home. He received a swift smack to the back of the head by Tenten. Don't say that about Tsunade-sama, she yelled angrily. He rubbed the back of his head painfully, tears shining at the corner of his eyes as he pouted like a child. But she is like that. Yet another smack in the head was his reward, this one sending him to the floor. Such abuse, he muttered. Tazuna snorted in amusement before taking another swig of his sake as he read over some of his documents. Naruto shot up to his feet, apparently unharmed from his previous abuse. Hey Tazuna, where's Tsunami-chan and Inari? I want to surprise them. Tazuna shrugged, not even looking up from his paperwork. They should be in the market, or something. You can still catch them there if you hurry. All right, Naruto yelled before he rushed out the door. Tazuna chuckled good-naturedly. That brat hasn't changed a bit. The slow, meticulous dripping of sewer water against the cold, hard stone of an underground cell was the sound that greeted his ears as he woke. The damp, stale air made him wince. The small squeaks and shuffling of rats hiding among the shadows of the room disgusted him. And the stupid guard asleep while he should be guarding was annoying him. Naruto slowly stood up from the heap they dared to call a bed and curled his lip in distaste at the rags they gave him as clothes, if they could even be called such. Sackcloth, several holes in plenty of places, and smelling like they had been sealed into a room for several long years. Oh yeah, he was definitely getting out of here. Forming a few quick hand seals, he slammed his hands down onto the floor and in a small puff of smoke a toad, which reached just above his ankles, sat looking around confusedly for a few moments before he looked up to Blonde, nodded silently, and watched in morbid fascination as the toad's throat expanded and with a strangled croak puked up several plastic bags, each covered in some stomach fluid, saliva and God knew what else. Its job done, the toad vanished in a puff of blinked as he stared down at the packages at his feet. That's still so absolutely disgusting. The Blonde let out a small shudder, but as the guard's snores reached him, he snapped out of his small daze and began relieving the small bags of their contents. 2 kunai pouches, his regular clothes, his lightsaber, some soldier pills, blood pills, ninja wire, a few storage scrolls. Yup, it was all changing his clothes. He looked to the sleeping guard. He closed his eyes and sighed before tossing a kunai, piercing the man's heart, killing him instantly. He never liked killing, he hated it actually, and he hoped he never grew to even remotely enjoy the act. Because the day he did was the day he went into early retirement. He knew that this was a necessary part of being a ninja, and hell, even a Jedi on some occasions needed to kill. That fact had been drilled into him by Jiraiya more than anyone. They had been in a small skirmish against some Otonins along the border at one point during his training trip. That's where he had taken his first kill. He was no older than 18. Snapping out of his daze, the blonde gathered the rest of the items under his arm, and with the flick of a button a single blade of the lightsaber flared to life. Bathing the dark room in its purple, a single thrust the blade pierced the stone wall deeply. Melting the rock on contact, the heat was so great it reached Naruto's face quite strongly. Slowly tracing a human-sized hole along the stone, Naruto prayed the shift changes wouldn't come in yet. It would be better to stay hidden for as long as he completed the human-sized circle. He threw out a mighty kick, and with a loud crash the stone crumbled to pieces, revealing the next cell over. But more importantly, Miss Me Tenten? Humph, took you long enough, she said absently from her place on a bed on the other side of the room. Though she continued to watch the lightsaber with unveiled admiration and amazement, she really wanted one of those things, for smirked, remembering just how this roundabout plan had come about. After almost 2 weeks of surveillance over the base of the man they had found out was named Kimiharo, brought them plenty of frustration. Neji with his Byakugan was able to get a decent picture of the outer defenses, which included sentries, guard towers, motion sensors, guard lights and surveillance cameras, and that was just on the outside of the base. The base, being 3 stories high and having 3 more sublevels if the blueprints Tazuna had shown them was anything to go by, and it practically ran the length of the whole island. Think Alcatraz, only stealth experts wouldn't have trouble getting past all of these security measures, that and a genjutsu expert. Unfortunately, they didn't have a genjutsu expert or a stealth expert, so they most likely would have been discovered very quickly or made a great big mess on their way in, something they didn't want because walking into a fight against unknown enemy numbers or skill was a death wish in, and if they had come up with a simple but effective plan, 2 of the team would be captured, then they'd escape from their cell, cut the power to the base, which would leave enough time for the other 2 to get in. The reason they had chosen Naruto and Tenten for the job was because Lee couldn't be discreet even if his life depended on it, and Niji's eyes were a dead giveaway on his status as a ninja. So Naruto and Tenten had been chosen for the smirked before tossing her clothes. She caught them and smiled gratefully. Naruto turned, allowing her to change with some semblance of privacy. "You know you owe me an explanation," she said after a moment. "I do?" he shot back innocently. "Don't play dumb with me, Naruto." He smiled somewhat sheepishly. He knew damn well what she was talking about. When they were being bullied around by some thugs, he had pulled the ever-so-handful Jedi mind trick and had convinced the simpleton guards that they were subdued prisoners, and were also good friends of Tazuna that could be used later as collateral. Knowing that he would have to explain the technique either to her or to Tsunade when they gave in the mission report, he sighed and began speaking. "It's a fairly simple technique, almost like the Yamanakas. I don't know much about the mechanics, but you basically suggest things to the person's mind, and if they're weak enough they succumb to it. If they have enough mental strength then they can resist it, awfully handy for missions like this." A moment of silence. "Your new techniques let you manipulate the minds of others?" There was a hint of astonishment and trepidation in her voice as she nodded without turning to face her. Somewhat he hesitated, not wanting to mention the Force's ability that allowed him to read the mind of others. It was well known that those extremely strong in the Force could even read your deepest, darkest memories, interpret your emotions, and even foretell the future with good chances of success. He didn't have the finesse nor the experience required for such a thing, but one day he might. So far I've only experimented with suggestion, but with enough refinement it could be possible to manipulate anything in the mind. I don't know. Another lull as Tenten seemed to mull over his not being able to stand her sitting behind him in silence. He spoke up. "Are you done getting dressed?" Oh yeah, sure." Naruto sighed in something akin to relief as he turned around. He held the kunai pouches in his hand ready to toss them to her, but as he turned fully around he noticed her already strapping her own kunai pouches to her thighs. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, looked up, chocolate brown eyes shining curiously. "Get what?" "The kunai pouches, the ones I had for you, are still here in my hand, both of them, so where did you get those?" "I hid them." A healthy pause. "Where they changed us into these rags, how the hell, where did you hide them?" A short silence as Tenten smirks wolfishly. "That's my secret." Another short silence. "Tenten, when this mission is done we really need to talk." Tenten shrugged. Yeah, whatever, now come on, we need to get started. Where's the generator room?" Naruto took out a sketch of the layout of the base, which they drew out from some old blueprints Tazuna had dug up. Because the place was built in Waves territory, the blueprints had to be given to the standing government. Naruto looked over the sketch and spoke up. Okay, we're in the basement right now, we get out of here, head left, go down the hall, and down 2 more levels, the generator room should be there. We knock that out, it should take 5 to 10 minutes for them to activate the second generator. I'd be really great to knock them both out to knock down the power entirely, but the second generator is on the other side of the compound, so I guess this will have to do. Tenten nodded as he rolled up the sketch. With another flick, his lightsaber flared to life and he cut open the bars, releasing them both as they rushed down the hall with all the speed and stealth they possessed. A few minutes later, after dodging and sneaking past some patrols along the hallway, the two found themselves in the large power room, which consisted of one massive generator and a control room to manage the massive thing. Judging by the design of the generator and overall layout of the area, Tenten deduced that it was powered by water currents. Most likely it was powered by an underground river. Feeling a tap on her shoulder, she turned her head to look at Naruto as he gestured toward a large power box on the far left side of the room. Making sure no one could see them, the two moved swiftly to their new objective. Opening it, Tenten found 3 large levers which were each labeled Generator 1, Generator 2, and Generator 3. She deduced that the large generator must have 3 areas in which the power must be distributed, so disabling this should effectively cut the power. That it? She heard Naruto question. At her nod, she watched as he removed his lightsaber from his belt and flicked it on. Stepping back to give him room, she watched him lazily swing the blade, the purple arch beautiful and graceful, at least until it slammed into the breakers, sending hundreds of sparks flying everywhere. The lights flickered for a moment before the entire room was bathed in darkness. Only the purple glow of the lightsaber illuminated them for a brief moment before Naruto turned it off, leaving them in absolute darkness. They heard the guards and engineers' shocked and outraged voices as they tried to deduce what had caused the generator to fail. They saw the flashlights flick on as the men scurried about the room. One was coming closer to the power box. In a second, Naruto turned and picked her up in his arms. She bit back a startled cry and felt the wind whip past her hair, and when she blinked, the darkened world came back into focus, and she noticed that she was back at the entry point of the room. Naruto then ran up the stairs as silently as he could, not stopping until he rose from the 3rd sublevel up to the 2nd sublevel. When he set her down, she immediately turned to face her. What the hell was that? The only person I've ever seen move that fast is Lee without his weights. Naruto had the decency to look embarrassed. Well, another one of the abilities I made is being able to increase my speed exponentially, almost 3 or 4 times my normal speed. Tenten's eyes narrowed. You sure seem to have learned a whole lot of different things during this training trip of yours, a bit too much. Naruto raised a single eyebrow and she noticed some of the playfulness leave his eyes as he spoke. Yeah, well, Jiraiya is a Sannin, a perverted one, but he was the one who trained the 4th. Even though the abilities and form of chakra I discovered and created are good, we still don't know what kind of side effects these will have in the long run. So while it may seem like a great thing, it could still screw me over in the long run. That's not what I mean, Naruto, she said seriously. It sometimes takes people several months, even years, to make one original technique. You, not only discovering a new form of chakra or energy, or whatever, and creating what seems like a good deal of potent and powerful techniques, and that lightsaber thing in just 3 years is a bit of a stretch even for you. Naruto knew she had a point, and in truth that was one of his worries when he had first told the council of the abilities he had. The only thing that probably saved him was Jiraiya, who had made some logs and showed it to them as evidence of the progress he had demonstrated during the training trip with these new techniques. Naruto sighed and rubbed his forehead. Look, just drop it. I have these techniques and that's all that really matters now. So let's just get on with the mission. After a brief moment she spoke. Alright, but still that leaves us with a small problem. It's pitch black. I can't see anything. Naruto smirked before he grabbed her hand. Come on, I can see just fine. We need to find a hiding spot and then contact Lee and Niji. Meanwhile, with Lee and Niji, few things in this world bothered Hyuga Niji. But he could safely say that this mission was the worst of his relatively short ninja career. To start things off, he had managed to cut his hair with that fancy sword, which then led to a 4-hour-long chase by his spandex-wearing teammate, which ended when he had torn off his sleeve to use as a makeshift bandage in order to fix his hair into a ponytail, along with Tenten wrapping the green-clad ninja in ninja wire. Then after that he had gotten to Tazuna's house and had been subjected to living with Naruto. Something that he knew he would never ever do again. The house had 2 spare bedrooms, which meant that the boys stayed in one room and Tenten got the other. And of course, Naruto snored loudly. Then to add insult to injury, the blonde was quite energetic in the morning, as was Lee, so while he didn't let you sleep at all during the night, their loud and incessant chatter gave you a throbbing headache in the morning. And now here he was sleep deprived, hair still cropped up in a ponytail, a headache because Lee wouldn't shut up, and trying to sneak into a base of some jackass who wanted to take over Wave Country by means of a sewer. He was trudging through a damn sewer. They decided that it would be the best entry point because of what they hoped would be a lack of security, and because it was an area that they could be almost certain of an easy escape route should push come to shove. He still didn't like it though. He blamed Naruto for this. In some twisted strange way the blonde was responsible for all of his misfortune. He didn't have proof to back up his accusations, but yes, the blonde was responsible for every bad thing that had happened on this mission. In fact, every mission he took with the blonde always ended with him getting fucked up. First the mission to retrieve Sasuke, what did he get? An arrow through his shoulder, and nearly dying from blood loss. The mission to rescue Gaara, he and his team had to fight Kisame, one of the Akatsuki, barely managing to beat the Shark Man, and then having to fight some weird-ass clones of now they were on this mission, in which he had gone through all this crap. Oh yes, he would pay. He would make sure of that. Somehow, someway Neji would make sure he paid for these transgressions. Meanwhile, with Naruto and Tenten, the two Konoha ninja found themselves hiding in the spacious air ducts of the installation. Naruto watched as below him, the guards armed with flashlights continued to scurry about, their alert level up as they suspected someone had infiltrated the base. Tenten calmly placed the two-way radio, earpiece on her ear, and spoke in a hushed tone. Neji, Lee, are you guys alright? Have you made it inside yet? Lee's voice came from the other end. Tenten-chan, my youthful comrade, it is good to hear your voice again. Yeah, thanks, Lee, nice to hear you too. Listen, what's the deal, are you guys in yet? We're not sure how much longer the power will be down, so pick it up. Tenten-chan, we are currently in the building, but we have made a slight alteration to our original plan. What did you do? We have changed our entry point. We are in what seems to be in a storage room. Naruto, find the storage room in the blueprints. Naruto again unrolled the sketch as he began looking over the blueprints. They're on the other side of the compound. She stayed silent for a moment, debating in her mind of the pros and cons over this slight alteration to their original plan. Alright guys, keep moving up. Find Kimihara. When you do complete the mission, we'll radio you or you'll radio us and we pull out. Clear? Right. Came Lee and Niji's reply from the other side of the radio before it went silent. She sighed, placing the radio back in her pocket before she looked back to Naruto, finding his slightly shocked gaze on her. What? Nothing, I just always figured it was Neji who gave the orders on this team. She shrugged. It depends really, sometimes I have the answers he doesn't, and sometimes Lee has the answers we don't. It's a give and take kind of thing, none of us are the leaders. He nodded and again rolled up the sketch as he placed it in his pocket again, moving as slowly as possible so as not to make too much sound in the cramped space of the air duct. Let's go. She nodded and together the two began crawling their way through the aluminum tunnel. With Lee and Neji using the Byakugan to pierce through the surrounding darkness, the two easily avoided the guards that patrolled the hall, making their way up the levels of the compound as stealthily as possible. Finally, after a few minutes of searching through various hallways, and avoiding even more sentries, the two finally found the room in which Kimihara was resting. It was easy to deduce this because the man had two guards outside the door, and because there was a shitload of money inside of a safe in the room. Obviously this man was just as money-obsessed as Gato was. Neji turned to Lee and spoke into his ear. After a moment Lee nodded and vanished in a green blur before two thumps were heard down the hallway. Neji smirked. Lee's prowess in speed and taijutsu were certainly valuable assets for a mission like this. Forming two quick bunchins and using a hinge to make them look like the guards, Lee and Neji dragged the two, now unconscious guards into the room of their target. The door wasn't even locked, dumbass. The two entered the room and closed the door silently behind him. As they did so, Neji immediately noticed the soft illumination of the hallway lights flickering on. He sighed in relief. If they had turned on a moment sooner they would have been discovered and gotten into a really big mess. Neji activated his Byakugan again, making sure there were no traps or tripwires before he walked silently towards the sleeping man. Just like Gato, he was fat, probably no taller than 5'7", balding and the perfect picture of a corporate pig. Neji's hand faintly glowed with chakra before he slammed it over the man's heart, stopping it instantly. A quiet, quick death, most likely better than he deserved. Neji sighed before turning to a grim-looking Lee. Alright, let's radio Tenten and Nere. He paused as he heard a strange sound directly above him. It was like groaning metal just before it. Neji leapt back as something large and apparently heavy fell over the area he had been standing on just a moment ago. Lee, by reflex, took up a fighting stance. At least until they heard the familiar voice of one Uzumaki Naruto. Ah, wow wow. He groaned as he pulled himself out of the busted remains of the air vent. Are you okay? They heard their other teammate call from above as her head poked out from the air vent. Just peachy. He gasped out as he rolled onto his back. Niji sighed and reached down to grab Naruto's arm and hauling him up to his feet. Damn it, Naruto, you really need to be more careful. Naruto shook his head trying to clear the cobwebs. Niji, what are you doing here? He spoke somewhat dazedly as Tenten leapt down from the air vent. Naruto-kun, my youthful comrade, Niji and I have already finished our assignment, now we just need to make our escape. Lee somehow managed to yell while whispering, something that should be physically impossible, but Lee somehow pulled it off. Naruto looked to the dead man on the bed, and could only think of one thing to say. Oh. A short pause. Well, an escape route is fairly easy, he said as he began walking to the window. The rest of the team shrugged as they began following. That was true, getting in was hard, getting out is easy. Niji, however, caught the sight of a pressure device on the edge of the window. His eyes widened as he looked back into the hallway, noticing again that the lights were on. That meant that Naruto stopped. But it was too late. With a small heave, the blonde pulled open the window, and in a second, red lights began flashing as horns blared. But what really took the cake was the great big iron barricade that just slammed down in front of the window, effectively keeping people out, but also locking them in. Naruto, Tenten, Lee and Niji each exchanged a glance which spoke some very clear and simple words. Oh shit. Who the hell ever said getting out was the easy part? The alarms flared to life around the group of Konoha Nins, and in just seconds, they could hear a multitude of footsteps running down the hallways. Immediately the door burst open, revealing several of the thug mercenaries coming to protect their employer. The first four that entered the door had their throats immediately impaled by Tenten's kunai. As more men continued to pour into the room, intent on rushing them, the four ninjas spread apart, two moving to each side of the bed to leave enough room for them to fight properly. Tenten took out two kunai from her pouch, where she then methodically proceeded to cut down all the thugs that rushed her in an impressive but nonetheless brutal display of her knife-fighting skills. Niji and Lee, using their respective taijutsu styles, also did quite well for themselves, easily killing any that approached them, Lee snapping necks and breaking bones, Niji using the juken to cause blinding pain and near-instant deaths, while Naruto, using a single blade of his lightsaber, seeing as how the cramped space of the room would lead him to injure his friends if he activated the second blade. Most of his jutsu, including summoning, Rasengan and shadow clones, would also prove to be more of a hindrance in this fight than an asset, so he was down to the lightsaber, and force techniques should be more than enough to handle a few simple thugs. The purple blade hummed as he cut through the mercenaries with almost ridiculous ease. The smell of burnt flesh assaulted his nostrils, making him cringe slightly. He ignored it, however, and used his lightsaber to block a swing from another of the thugs, which resulted in his opponent's sword being cut in half before he cut another deep gash across the man's chest, the wound instantly cauterizing itself from the unimaginable heat the beam generated. The four Konoha shinobi immediately ran out of the room and into the hallway, each looking to make sure there were no enemies in their current area. Niji, what's the best escape route? Niji immediately activated his Byakugan. His expression visibly tightened as he spoke. We're completely surrounded, and all the hallways I can see are packed with soldiers. Looks like we're not getting out of here without a fight. The group fell into a momentary silence, which was broken, surprisingly, by Lee. My youthful comrades, we must split up. The narrow halls will only serve to hinder our respective fighting styles if we do not. The group exchanged some worried glances before they each nodded. All right, Tenten and I will go this way, you guys go the other way. Don't make me have to come back and save you. The blonde ninja smirked at the two as he took a quick jab at their skills. Niji too allowed himself a slow smirk to cross his otherwise impassive features. I could say the same to you. He shot back before he turned sharply on his heel. Come on, Lee. Lee offered a quick nice guy pose, complete with his signature pink smile which stung Naruto's eyes and made him see dots as his vision distorted. He tried to clear his vision by blinking and rubbing his eyes, but it proved fruitless. Come on, Naruto, Tenten said after a moment before she dragged him down their end of the hall. I can't see a damn thing, he muttered to himself as Tenten continued to drag him down the hallway by his wrist. Lee and Niji ran until they reached the end of the hallway, where it split up into two separate directions. Which way do we go? Lee questioned as he heard the footsteps coming closer towards them. Niji activated his Byakugan again and found a small secret doorway down the hallway to their right, which led to a secret passage, which Niji was almost certain it would lead to an exit. He was about to speak when the two suddenly heard a voice shout out behind them. Hey! I found the intruders! The two spun around and saw about 2 or 3 dozen mercenaries appear in the hallway at the man's call before they rushed the two Konoha Nins. Niji was about to tell Lee to follow when Lee suddenly grabbed his arm. Come, Niji, we must leave! Before he took off down the opposite hallway, further and further away from their quick escape route. No, wait, you idiot! But it was no use, Lee just kept on running, with the Merc army hot on their heels. Meanwhile, Tenten continued to drag Naruto down their end of the hallway, where the two came across an indoor garden, filled with yellow orchids, a small sakura tree and fountain, oddly peaceful considering who the owner of the base was. They were currently standing on the second level, one level above them, one obviously below them. Okay, I think our best bet would be to head to the roof. The structure is probably weakest there. I can use my explosive tags to blast a hole into the roof, Naruto said dazedly as he continually tried to blink away the blurriness that clouded his vision thanks to Lee's way to bright smile. What the hell did he brush his teeth with? Bleach. Tenten, having had her attention diverted to tracking the numerous footsteps in their area, didn't really hear him, and so it was not surprising when she turned and spoke. What'd you say? Just as Naruto was about to speak up again, an arrow whizzed by his head. Due to his still blurry vision, he did not know the exact location of his attacker, but he did know the general area the individual was in due to his force awareness. Tenten too knew where the attacker was, but unlike him, she could see him, and therefore wasted no time in leaping up to the third-floor balcony, leaving unknown to her, blind Naruto completely alone as she attacked the archer with her kunai. Tenten? He questioned as he suddenly realized her presence was missing from his side. He heard her grunts and battle cries from his position and tried to follow her voice. God damn it, Lee, next time I see you I'm gonna knock those fucking teeth right out of your mouth. He muttered angrily to himself as he continued to stumble across the hallway. Naruto, what the hell are you doing? Tenten yelled from the third floor, still unaware of the blonde's predicament, as more men appeared from the various hallways. I told you, damn it, I can't fucking SEAHHHH, the force-wielding ninja cried out as he reached a staircase, stumbling slightly before he fell into a tangled heap of limbs and clothing at the bottom of the stairs. Oh yeah, Lee was definitely gonna die. Naruto opened his eyes and finally realized that the blurriness had cleared from his vision. Of course it couldn't happen before he fell down the damn stairs. No, of course not. That would have been a good thing, and just for today the gods, or the force or whatever, was hoping to fuck with him. Naruto stood up and walked into the open garden where he heard Tenten's voice coming from the third floor. He looked up, as one of the hired men was kicked off the balcony. With a rather loud scream he landed at Naruto's feet head first, his brains spilling out onto the floor. Naruto looked at the dead body, then back up as another individual. This one, riddled with kunai and shuriken, followed the earlier man's example and took the expressway down. Damn, was the only thing he could think as he looked back up at her apparent position on the third floor. He was about to jump up when he felt someone else behind him. He spun around, igniting the lightsaber before he cut another arrow aimed for his left shoulder with his other hand. He sent a relatively strong force push to the man's direction, sending him crashing into the wall behind him. His head hitting with a loud crack, he fell to the floor, either dead or unconscious. Naruto again turned and saw Tenten was cornered now. He was about to leap up to help her when he saw her smirk. Pausing before his leap, he watched as she reached into her kunai pouch before she pulled out 2 smoke bombs before she threw them onto the floor, covering the area she had previously occupied with smoke. Naruto saw her form leap out from the smoke, landing on the other end of the balcony, giving her a brief moment to breathe as the men scrambled after her. Her smirk grew before she reached into her pouch and pulled out a pair of gloves. Naruto blanched, thinking the weapons specialist had mastered Sakura's strength technique. The thought of another girl his age with such a monstrous power definitely did not make him feel at ease. Tenten swiftly put the gloves on, and with a truly evil smile that would have made Anko proud, the girl looked down to his form and smirked. Hey Naruto, now you're going to find out just why they say I'm the best weapon mistress in Konoha. Naruto raised an eyebrow before he watched the thugs approach her as she finished putting the gloves on. She raised a single slender arm before she snapped her fingers. Naruto's sharp eyes caught the small distortion of light which extended from her fingers by the motion. What in the world? Naruto's, and everyone else's eyes widened as the 3 men closest to her suddenly lost their heads literally. 6 thuds were heard as both heads and bodies fell to the floor. One of the heads rolled through the railing and fell to the third floor again at Naruto's feet. The blonde twitched in mild irritation before he looked back up at Tenten. The girl smirked at the mercenary's stupefied expression before she moved her right hand in a sweeping motion. The next 7 men couldn't even react before they were sliced up, each being cut in numerous and distinct ways. The men who had took out their bows and fired on the weapon mistress with their arrows, not wanting to get close to her. The arrows didn't get to approach her before they were also cut up in midair. Tenten smirked again before she sent her attacks forward, cutting down the entire group before her in seconds, even as they tried to flee. Naruto watched the entire proceeding with his mouth agape, eyes wide and eyebrows raised as limbs fell around his person. Holy shit! He muttered when the spectacle was over. Unfortunately, one of the men Tenten had just cut up also had an explosive in his hand. Said hand had been one of the ones that had fallen from the third balcony, and was now just a few feet away from the blonde, the fuse still burning. Apparently, the man had intended to throw it at Tenten, but his limb was timely sliced off from the rest of his body. Unfortunately, the blonde still didn't notice it because he was busy staring at Tenten as she sat on the railing, laughing at his expression. Wow, he said after a moment, not having another word he could find to describe the display. Tenten smirked, showing off the glove and the small metal wires attached to its fingertips. I know, right, it's my own invention, Guy-sensei helped me do it. My natural elemental affinity is earth. Obviously earth doesn't have anywhere near the cutting power of wind, which is what I use to power these gloves. A seal inside the glove itself converts a portion of my chakra into the wind element, so these wires are infused with both the wind and earth element. Earth for durability and easier control, and wind for the cutting edge it has. Her smile was almost radiant as she eyed her gloves pridefully. Naruto nodded appraisingly. That's really good, Tenten, he said, obviously impressed. Tenten smirked again, but just then she saw the smoke from the fuse. Naruto, jump! She cried out in alarm. Naruto spun on his heel, seeing the bomb about 7 feet away. His eyes widened in momentary panic before he sent another strong push using the force, sending the bomb towards the other end of the room. It didn't even make it halfway before the fuse burned out and the bomb exploded. The shockwave knocked Naruto off his feet and nearly knocked Tenten off her perch. Naruto heard a loud cracking and rumbling, and felt the ground shift beneath him. His eyes snapped open before he saw a large jagged crack appear on the floor of the indoor garden before it buckled and collapsed entirely. With a startled yell ripped from his throat, Naruto fell into the darkness below. Meanwhile, with Lee and Niji, the two Konoha ninja continued to practically bulldozer their way through the maze that was the compound. There were a lot of mercenaries after them. The confined space, while it got rid of their numerical advantage, also made it extremely difficult for them to fight properly. This was especially true for Lee, seeing as how the greatest asset of his taijutsu rested in his quick footwork and kicks. And Niji, while his taijutsu remained relatively unhampered, except for maybe a technique like the kaiten, hardly practiced any form of kenjutsu, except for the simple academy basics. He had always counted on his speed to allow him to maneuver around attacks with close-range weapons, where he would then finish them with a quick juken strike or at least weaken them. But again, in this narrow hall, his maneuvering skills were also severely hampered. So they were currently running from the large group of mercenaries directly behind them, while bashing their way past any stragglers in front of them, hoping to find an exit soon. Damn it, Lee, this is all your fault. But Niji, my youthful comrade, this predicament we currently find ourselves in is no one's fault. Why would you blame it on me? Because damn it, if you had listened to me back there and turned around, we would already be out of here, the Hyuga prodigy exclaimed. Niji, do not worry, I am certain there will be another secret passage we can use soon if we keep on running. Watch, I shall find one for you, my youthful comrade. Lee yelled enthusiastically before he dashed ahead. Niji cursed as he tried to keep up, only to see the green blur dash around the corner before he heard his voice. This way, Niji. Niji growled before he sped up, trying to catch up with his green-clad teammate. Niji heard a great crash and paused. Something told him he was not gonna like what came with that crash. A tingle went up his spine, his palms felt sweaty, and he felt. And sure enough, Lee skidded back and bolted towards him. Not that way! Not that way! Niji watched as Lee shot past him and looked down the hallway where even more mercenaries were charging them, these clad in black armor that appeared to have a good deal of knowledge on kenjutsu judging from their stance. God damn it, Lee! The Hyuga prodigy cursed as he spun on his heel and rushed down the hallway following the taijutsu specialist, all the while cursing his existence and lack of stealth skills. Naruto choked and gagged as he sat up, spitting out something that was not water as he hacked and coughed. God, that is nasty. Naruto continued to gag, which only got worse as he observed his surroundings. Rust-covered pipes, moss and fungus-covered concrete, and a literal river of crap rushing past him. He was in a sewer. He gagged some more and spit in order to get that decidedly nasty taste out of his mouth as the radio on his side flared to life with Tenten's voice. Naruto! Naruto, are you okay? Answer me! He grabbed the radio and spoke into it. I'm fine, Tenten. He heard her visibly sigh with relief as she spoke again. Oh good, scared me there for a moment. Where are you? Naruto looked around for a moment. You don't want to know, he answered after a moment. Whatever. Can you get back up here? Naruto looked to the rubble that had collapsed next to him, blocking out his entry point. I could use the lightsaber to cut through the rubble, but that could cause another cave-in. Let's not risk it. Try to get out from where you are. I'll keep heading up to the roof and we'll meet up at Tizuna's house like we agreed. Roger, he said, hearing her radio click off. He turned to look at the darkness of the tunnel before him, as well as the river of stuff he had to make his way through. I blame Lee for this, he muttered to himself before he started his disgusting trudge through the sewers. A few minutes later, Tenten found herself on the attic of the compound. She had noticed, the first time she saw the blueprints, that this was one of the only areas of the compound that was not covered with concrete, and therefore it was the easiest area to escape from. So, placing her explosive tags in a circular pattern on the roof, she took cover behind one of the crates as the explosions went off. Smirking at her handiwork, she gracefully leapt through the newly made exit and onto the outside roof. Now all she had to do was head to the south side of the compound, walk across the ocean, and wait for the rest of the team at Tizuna's house. Meanwhile, with Lee and Niji. Lee, I hate you. Such were the angry words of one Hyuga Niji as the two found themselves cornered by the mercenary thugs. Lee had once again taken another wrong turn, which had led Niji, in his attempt to warn the boy, to follow, and now they were being consistently pushed back further and further into the dead-end hallway they currently found themselves in. Each mercenary they struck down or injured was easily replaced by a new one as the horde seemed endless. Niji, do not worry, the flames of youth shall always prevail. We shall triumph over this obstacle. Our flames of youth shall not be snuffed out. Niji shook his head and resisted the urge to bang his head against the wall. Lee, for the love of God, there is no such thing as flames of youth, and every time you speak about it you sound ridiculous, so would you please allow me to die with some semblance of dignity, and not say that in front of so many people? Lee looked completely appalled by what Niji had just stated and spoke. Niji, how can you say such a thing? Niji gritted his teeth. You know what? Fine. Prove it. Prove to me that the flames of youth are real. If you can find us one damn escape route that does not involve us having to kill this entire group of mercenaries, then fine, I will acknowledge that the flames of youth exist. Lee visibly straightened and began looking around the hallway frantically for some kind of exit. A snort from one of the mercs brought his attention to a small metal door next to the man that had snorted, who was just behind the guy in the front row. He saw that right above the door was a sign which read in big bold letters, "Laundry Chute." Lee paused, his eyes rolling up to his head as he put two and two together. Before anyone could react, Lee unstrapped the two orange weights from his legs and threw them with all his might into the group of mercs in front of them. They tumbled back, over one another due to the insane force the weights were thrown with. Before Niji could react, he felt Lee grab him by the back of the jacket, drag him forward, and dash to the laundry chute. What the hell? Niji yelled as Lee stuffed him in there, jumping in himself a second later. Hey, wow! Niji yelled as he landed in one of the industrial-sized hampers. The impact made the item roll forward, pulling another hamper chain to it forward in time to catch Lee as well. Niji and Lee both pulled themselves up after a few moments. Niji panted slightly as he looked at Lee, who had landed on some fluffy white towels. Not bad, Lee. Lee smiled and was about to give his pink smile when something caught his eye. His smile immediately fell from his lips as his eyes took on a glint of fear. Niji immediately tensed. Nothing ever made Lee stop smiling. Ever. He followed Lee's gaze and noticed just what he was looking at. He was looking at the pile of clothes he had landed on. Niji looked down and immediately tensed, his form shaking with rage as his face twisted in disgust. He reached up onto his head and pulled off an article of clothing from his hair. Jock straps. He had landed in jock straps. His face reddened with rage as his Byakugan involuntarily flared. Suddenly the Hyuga prodigy spun around and latched his fingers around Lee's neck, lifting him and shaking him violently. I'm gonna fucking kill you, Lee. His revenge was interrupted, however, as the two heard a clanging noise above them. They looked up in time to see several fused bombs fall onto Lee's hamper. Niji and Lee's eyes widened. Oh, fuck me. Boom. Tenten stumbled and fell as an explosion blew out an entire wall of the compound behind her. She spun around, her wired gloves at the ready as she watched the raging fire for a few moments, ready for any enemy that might emerge. Suddenly, two familiar figures stumbled out of the flames, both completely covered in soot, their clothes singed and burned off in several places. Tenten sighed in obvious relief as she rushed forward and hugged her two teammates. Geez, couldn't you guys be just a bit more subtle? She said sarcastically after a moment. Lee was about to speak when Niji covered his mouth. Go. He gritted out as he looked around. Where's Naruto? We got separated. He's in the sewers trying to find a way out last I checked. Niji smiled widely, something that kind of freaked his female teammate out a little bit. Niji actually looked giddy, and Niji never looks anything even remotely related to giddy. Ah, I see. Niji spoke in a tone laced with veiled happiness. Well then, let's just make our way to Tazuna's house then. We'll wait for Naruto there. Ehehehe, right. Tenten agreed nervously, completely creeped out by her teammate's happy face and voice. She turned but stumbled slightly on a loose stone. As she stumbled, a small explosive note fell from her pouch and was carried by the wind. The three watched as the small slip of paper was carried by the wind, slowly, tantalizingly shifting through the wind. Finally it slipped through the bars of a manhole which led into the sewers. Naruto cursed loudly as he continued to plow his way through the sewage. God, he needed a freaking shower after this. He paused as a small slip of paper drifted past his eyes. A paper that looked oddly like. His head snapped in the paper's direction just as the explosive tag stuck to the wall and began fizzling out. Ah shit! Bang! The small but loud explosion knocked the blonde back to the adjacent wall, knocking the wind right out of him and causing his head to spin. Several large cracks appeared along the wall, and the sewer started to flow into a new hole formed towards the bottom right side. Naruto, still dazed by the impact, offered little resistance as he was dragged down with the current into the newly made hole, which appeared to have opened up into an old, abandoned sewer pipe, before more stones from the roof fell and blocked it out. Naruto shook the cobwebs from his head as he stood up, and began following the newly discovered passageway. At least this one was free from most of the crap the other one had. After several minutes of walking, Naruto came across the end of the pipe, which was blocked out by even more concrete. The blonde took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He tried to repeat the old Jedi code his mother had said a few times in an attempt to ease the process. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is no fuck this. He yelled out in anger, annoyance, and frustration as he activated his double-bladed lightsaber and promptly proceeded to burn his way through the concrete between himself and his exit. After a few seconds in which he made the circular opening, he reared back and kicked the concrete wall with all his might, sending it toppling over in a heap of rubble. As he stepped through the new door, he realized that he was inside yet another compound. As he looked around, a voice reached his ear. Who the fuck are you? Naruto turned around and found a girl, staring at him with a pretty pissed-off expression on her face. Red hair, nice, tight short shorts, a long-sleeved shirt with two lengths on either side which almost reached her knee, but still left her firm stomach exposed, a kunai pouch on her left thigh, and an attitude to boot. He answered as best he could. Besides someone who's having a bad day, you tell me. Karen noticed the leaf forehead protector and took out her own kunai. A trespassing leaf who's about to die. Naruto's eyes widened and he then noticed a small musical note on the wall. Sound Village. The purple, double-bladed lightsaber flared to life in time to deflect a thrown kunai from the red-headed girl as Naruto settled himself in a defensive stance. This is Wave Country, just what the hell is Sound doing here? He snarled as she took out two kunai, placing herself in a defensive stance as they began circling each other. You're not getting out of here alive, Leaf Nin, so it doesn't matter anyway, she exclaimed before throwing a kunai above him, cutting a ninja wire which held the stones of the roof in place. Naruto's head snapped up in time to watch the stones of the roof collapse. Karen smirked, but it died quickly as the young blonde-haired Leaf Nin held up his hand and the boulders that had been falling were held up by an unseen force. He looked back at her, the smirk on his lips growing before he directed the hand towards her. The next thing she knew, the stones that had been hovering above his head were heading straight for her. Falling onto her back, she let the stones fly over her before springing back to her feet. Now on guard, her eyes narrowed as she watched the smirking Leaf Nin. There were traps all over this base, and she knew the location of each and every one of them, hence why this base required very little guards to speak of, besides herself and a few others who were also trained on how to activate and avoid the traps. Still, if he could stop any incoming object like those stones, then about 40 of the traps were useless, and if that purple laser blade at his side could cut anything as easily as it did her kunai, and he was fast enough with it, that was another 30 to 40, still they could be used as distractions. Tossing another kunai so the butt of the kunai hit the tile at the boy's feet. Naruto heard the sound of shifting stones behind him, turning in time to catch sight of a spiked log as it swung down from the ceiling heading straight for him. Somersaulting above the trap, he used the lightsaber to cut the ropes which held it, letting it fall to the floor with a crash. Landing on his feet, he turned around to face Karen again, only to find the girl already in a lunge, a chakra scalpel in one hand and a curved kunai hook blade in the other. He moved to swing his lightsaber, but the hook-like kunai clashed with the hilt, gripping it safely as Karen held it in a reverse grip as she moved to stab her chakra scalpel into his eye. Grabbing her wrist, he fell back and placed his legs on her stomach, throwing her over and off him before he jumped to his feet. Spinning around, he found Karen again, charging him. He extended his hand, causing the girl to stop dead as a firm grip on her neck began lifting her up above the ground. She coughed and gasped as she struggled for breath, clawing at her throat in an attempt to remove the invisible appendage which was now cutting off her air supply. Naruto sighed as he relented his grip only slightly, allowing her enough room to breathe. Now I'll ask again, what the hell is Sound Village doing in a place like Wave? Fuck you! She gasped out before she threw another kunai, hitting a tile on the roof before Naruto could stop her. Before the blonde Jinchuriki could react, the floor beneath him suddenly fell open. Letting out a scream of shock and anger, he fell down into the dark abyss beneath as Karen held onto the edge of the trap hole, gasping and coughing for air before she pulled herself up. Getting to her knees as she rubbed her throat, she growled in anger. Damn bastard! She growled before she got to her feet and stumbled over to a nearby pillar. Opening a secret compartment with her chakra, she found a small but none the less intricate seal within. Cutting her finger so the blood poured freely, she wiped it on the seal. Watching it pulse a few times, she formed some hand seals before she slammed her hand on the seal KI. She yelled, watching the purple lines extend from the seal, up and down the pillar, and disappearing into the ceiling and floor below. Let's see how smug you are with those little tricks now, bastard. She smirked as she adjusted her glasses and looked down into the hole he had fallen through. Naruto's eyes slowly opened to take in his surroundings. It was dark, it was smelly, and there were no stairs of which to speak of. God damn it, I am seriously getting tired of falling into places like this. He groaned as he stood up, cracking his neck as he looked up to the opening above. He had probably fallen a good 20 to 30 feet. A fatal fall for civilians. Thank God he wasn't a civilian then. He moved to leap up when a strange sound, like that of some huge bug, came from behind him. His lightsaber was currently turned off. Now he had two options: one, he could simply jump for the opening which was now closing back up, or he could turn the saber on and take a quick look, and then he could jump and run. Every single fiber of his being was screaming at the top of its proverbial lungs to simply run. That looking back would bring absolutely nothing but pain and grief and a good deal of misfortune and annoyance to his being. But he was Uzumaki Naruto. So, ignoring all of his gut instincts and basic workings of human logic, his lightsaber flared to life before he turned his head to look back. What he found was a humanoid bug-like creature, with the face of a human apart from the lower jaw, which was split down the middle, like an insect's, as well as some crab-like appendages for each of his arms and knees bent in the opposite direction, but were still perfectly functional, as the creature demonstrated by stepping closer to him. Its skin was black, its mandibles letting drool fall to the floor freely as it hissed at him. Naruto backed up and held the lightsaber in a ready stance as the creature approached, hissing and growling at him in agitation. Naruto was about to swing when another sound came from behind him. Now he knew he shouldn't turn around. So he didn't. Instead, he leaped up to the nearest wall, using a combination of ninja training and force manipulation to cover about half the distance before he latched onto the wall with chakra, the closing opening above further strengthening his sense of urgency. Still, not being able to help himself, he glanced to the bottom of the pit again, only to find hundreds of glowing eyes staring back at him. He could also see several of them beginning to climb the walls too. And from the small sliver of light he could see some of their mutated forms. They ranged from insects to reptiles, amphibians, and even fish. Letting out a small sound of pity and a vow of making the vile snake pay for this when next he found him, the blonde leapt through the opening before it closed with a resounding clang. Standing on the now solid floor, he found Karen's smirking form. Growling in anger at the girl, seeing as how she undoubtedly knew about just what was down there, and what had happened to those people to make them that way, but still seemed so uncaring towards it, made his blood boil. Next time, bitch, have a door that closes quicker. Karen nodded, the smirk still firmly on her lips. Oh, maybe I'll get that fixed for next time. But personally, I didn't want to miss this, so I'm glad you escaped. What the hell are you talking about? Miss YRGH. Naruto suddenly yelled before he turned and looked behind him and down to his calf, where there was a blade-like appendage right through it. Looking at the owner of said appendage was one of the creatures he had left down in that pit. Half of his torso sticking out from the floor, and slowly more of it was being revealed as he pulled himself up. Naruto's eyes went wide in horror as more creatures began rising from the floor. That's right, Leaf Bastard, these walls, and these creatures have a special ability. Orochimaru made it so their chakra and that within the seals within the walls would always move at the same frequency, if you will, which allows these little sentries to move through almost any wall in the space like they were ghosts. She said, smirking through her glasses. These guys were made by some combination of genetic engineering, mass sealing techniques, and curse seal transformation. These are the base guards made by Orochimaru himself to protect places like this. Naruto growled in anger before he cut off the creature's arm with the lightsaber, watching as it screeched in pain. He moved to then pull it out, but the black, knife-like appendage soon melted and reformed on the creature's arm before it tried to swipe at him again. Barely reacting in time due to his shock, the blonde stepped back with a small, startled cry. Karen smirked. That instant regeneration-like feature was very useful on several occasions. What the boy didn't know was that these sentries were in an inactive state the entire time they were down there, and once they were activated they would live for about 30 minutes before their bodies broke down, and all vital functions ceased due to the inhuman rate their metabolism had to go to keep up. She doubted he could last that long, and if he did she could probably pick him off in his weakened state. She frowned, however, as she caught sight of the wound on his leg sealing up in just a few short seconds. Now that could be a problem. The only real way to kill these sentries was to destroy or damage the brain. Now with that laser blade of his he could accomplish that feat quite easily since none of the creatures could block it. Now that on its own wouldn't be such a big deal, since they could just swarm over him and injure him with sheer numbers. But if you throw in this guy's own healing factor, this could definitely be a problem if he discovered the way of killing them fast enough. Naruto cursed as he looked from one end of the hallway to the other. All around him he could see these mutant things crawling out of the floor like some freaky garden weeds. Letting out a quick curse before he gave one last sidelong glance to Karen and ran down the hall, dodging and weaving through stray strikes from the still rising creatures as well as slicing off a few limbs from whatever strikes he couldn't dodge. "What the hell are you idiots waiting for? Go after him!" Karen barked out. The mutated creatures hissed and growled before they did as ordered. Naruto's form blurred ahead of the freaky mutants through a quick combination of chakra and force-enhanced speed. Pivoting back around as he reached an intersection in the hallway, he placed the lightsaber back on his belt before he raised his hands towards the roof. A look of concentration crossed his features as his hands slowly lowered like they were pulling something down. Loud resounding cracks and snaps were heard as the stones on the roof began to crumble as the entire base shook from the force bearing down on it. Karen snapped her head up as cracks began to form on the roof above her. She looked back to the blonde-haired kid at the end of the hall and caught his smirk before the whole roof collapsed, blocking him from sight. Acting fast, she ran to the other end of the hall, barely making it in time to avoid the crumbling roof as it collapsed. Naruto panted from the exertion, but the smirk still remained firmly on his lips. That is until the creatures simply crawled out of the rubble, most completely unharmed. "Oh yeah, I forgot about that little skill of theirs," he stated somewhat nervously as the creatures began skulking towards him, like some predators that had just found their favorite prey. Forming a quick hand seal Kagebunshin no Jutsu, he yelled, forming 11 clones and as one, for Naruto's bolted down each hallway available to them. Momentarily confused, the creatures paused before each of them chased after a set of Naruto's. Naruto smirked so they weren't too bright. It was at times like this he wished he knew genjutsu, that way he could make a genjutsu on them which would make it so that they would be attacking each other by making some of them look like him. But he didn't know genjutsu, so he was up shit's creek in that department. Vowing to take some genjutsu lessons from Kurenai when he got back, the blonde continued running. "Would you just admit we're lost already, you stubborn overgrown tin can?" Jolie said angrily as he punched more buttons on the ship's bridge controls and glared at the younger male who was also working the ship's controls. "We're not lost, you senile old jackass, and even if we were, what the hell should I do besides what I'm doing right now? Which is reconfiguring the coordinates in the ship's computer? Ask for directions. We're 7 trillion miles from the nearest planet." Beside them, the Mandalorian recruits and officers watched their fearless and cool-headed leader argue with a 70-year-old man and was currently losing the argument, seeing as how he was quickly losing his patience. "How in the world do you get lost with the directions she gave you? She was very specific and told you the coordinates, and precise turns and angles and all these wonderful numbers to help guide you. You, sir, are by far the worst pilot this side of the galaxy. CRTH, despite all his crashes, I is a much better pilot than you," the older man accused angrily as he pointed dramatically. "In case you didn't notice, old man, we're not in a galaxy anymore, and unless you want me to kick your wrinkly old carcass out the airlock, you'll shut your mouth and let me reconfigure these coordinates in peace. That is, of course, unless you think you can do better." "You know what, you little bastard, move," Jolie said, standing up and walking over to the coordinate panel as he shoved him out of the way. Hearing a faint echoing laughter to his right, he shifted his eyes to Revan's ghost-like form. Looking to Candace as the man stood behind him, he could immediately tell he was the only one who could sense her. "I've missed all this, you two never change," she said with a small smile. "Revan, quick, tell me, what were the coordinates?" he communicated mentally to the younger woman. She smiled. "Always trying to put the young people in their place at Jolie?" she questioned as she laughed. He shot a mental glare her way before she spoke. "Oh, all right then," she said before standing and walking over to the panel. He followed her fingers and pressed the button she pressed or motioned to press. He heard her calming laughter one more time before she finally vanished, a sound that brought a delighted smile to his own lips. It had been so long since he had heard her laugh. He missed it. Still, as the engine hummed back to life and the feminine voice of the computer reached his ears, coordinates accepted, restarting hyperdrive now. He couldn't help but put that smug smirk back on his lips as Candace crossed his arms with a huff. Whatever, old man, get the hell off my bridge. Jolie's smile widened as he bowed mockingly. As you wish, your terrible Mandalorian-ness, he said before he began making his way out of the bridge. Before he got to the exit, however, he stopped, startled as a harsh, cold, cruel presence made itself known to his senses. His eyes, though physically blind, could still see much farther than most, maybe even farther than Revan herself. And as he turned to face the main window of the ship's bridge, which stared straight out into the black abyss of space, what he saw terrified him. Clothes black as the void of space, eyes hollow and dead, a mask which resembled a skull covering his features. The man slowly turned to face him, and as he did, Jolie felt a pit form in his stomach, his palms felt sweaty. The feeling of fear was nauseating, and as the man spoke, his voice was screeching yet whispering all the same Narcreashdakalakatamur. And at once the vision faded as a wave of dark side energy hit Jolie head on. The older man let out a strangled gasp as he fell to his knees, his form shaking as sweat dripped from his forehead. Old man! Jolie! Several of the Mandalorian crew yelled in mild alarm as they rushed to the older man's side. His antics were always a mild reprieve from the dull routine of space travel, so he had become something of a treasured crewmate despite his history as a Jedi Knight. Jolie struggled to catch his breath as the younger Mandalorian recruits helped him to his feet. Candace stood in front of him and griped his shoulder in order to hold him steady. What's wrong, old man? Need the medic? He questioned gruffly, hiding the tone of worry in his voice. Check the sensors? Jolie gasped out. Candace looked to the technician and nodded his assent. The man turned and after several seconds he spoke. Nothing on sonar or long-range radar, sir. Jolie finally caught his breath as he straightened. What range do those sensors have? 20 clicks in all directions, sir. Jolie shivered. 20 clicks? This being could deliver such a powerful wave of fear from more than 20 clicks away. Just what monstrosity was that creature? It couldn't be human. You all right, old man? What'd you sense? Nothing. Jolie shook his head. I'm sorry, years must be catching up to me, I guess. He mumbled as he grabbed onto one of the nearby Mandalorian recruits. Can you help me to my cabin, kiddo? In case I get another of these little attacks again? Yes, sir. The youngster replied as he helped him out the door. Candace watched Jolie leave, eyes narrowed behind his visor. The old man had felt something, and judging from his reaction, a big something. He'd have to question him on it later. The feminine voice of the computer again broke through the minor silence. Activating hyperdrive. The ship shuddered once before stars whizzed by their vision. Naruto hid as more of the mutant creatures passed by his side, their hissing and screeching voices reaching his ears as they hunted for him. Looking around the hall, he found a lone door. With as much speed and stealth as he could manage, he ran down the hall and slipped into the room. Sighing in relief, the blonde took a look at the room and blanched as he caught sight of several things along the walls. Damn, Jiraiya could have a field day with some of this stuff. He was brought out of his musings as the voice of that girl he had met before reached his ears through the wall. What the hell do you mean you can't find him? He heard her voice to one of the mutant things as it replied. Mistress's intruder disappeared. We not find. A short pause. Whatever, just keep looking. If he escaped the base and reports this to Konoha, we'll have to leave to the next base over. Naruto cursed. Apparently there was another base nearby. Looking up, he found another ventilation shaft. In an underground base like this, all ventilation shafts needed to lead up to the surface, in order to keep cycling the clean air with the stale air from down here. The reason he hadn't done it before was because of all the creepy crawlies around. As he went under the vent in preparation to jump up into it, his blood ran cold at the sound of a door opening. Snapping his head around, he caught sight of Karen. As their eyes met, he watched her eyes fill with righteous fury. What the fuck are you doing in my room? She roared, taking out a kunai and twirling it in her finger. Your room? He questioned incredulously before he looked around to the items lining the wall. Can't say that's entirely unexpected, he remarked offhandedly. Karen growled before she lunged at him, her anger at the invasion of her room evident in her eyes. Naruto caught her wrists with his hand and slammed her against the wall, pinning her wrists above her head with one hand and using the other hand to place his forearm in her mouth, muffling her shouts of anger lest the mutant things hear her. Using the force, he activated the lightsaber and held it so it was tantalizingly close to her throat. Immediately her frantic struggles ceased as the purple blade hummed much too close to her flesh for comfort. Now then. Naruto spoke slowly, catching his breath and composing himself. What is sound doing here, and how many other bases do you have? Karen looked momentarily torn before she pushed herself against the wall, surprising the blonde as the whole wall fell back with a crash. It was a fake. Karen placed her feet on Naruto's stomach and heaved him off her, then rolled back so that now she was straddling him. Having lost his concentration, the lightsaber clattered on the floor harmlessly as it deactivated. Karen raised her kunai but again had her wrists caught by the blonde ninja before he flipped them over, this time with him straddling her. He grabbed the knife out of her hand and held it onto her neck. Looking over the new room to make sure none of the freaky mutant things had come through the walls again brought his eyes to several more items along the walls. These in far more numbers and far, far more interesting. Just how would you use something like that? You are a freak, he muttered to himself. The distraction, however, worked, seeing as how Karen delivered a brutal punch to his face followed by a kick which sent him crashing into the wall at the end of the room, several of the items falling around him as the wall rattled. Before he could react, Karen's knee had connected with his stomach and she grabbed the collar of his shirt. Bastard, she hissed, and before he knew what was happening he felt a pair of lips crash down onto his own and a tongue slip into his mouth, meeting with his own with an almost fevered hunger. Momentarily confused by this turn of events, Naruto nearly missed the opportunity it presented. Grabbing a kunai from his pouch as the tongue scraped along the roof of his mouth causing him to shudder, the blonde slammed the butt of the weapon in the back of her head, knocking her unconscious. As she slumped forward, Naruto held her up, confused by her actions but enjoying the taste of cinnamon still on his lips and in his mouth. He had to admit it was a good kiss, and he could partially understand. After all, just how long had she been here with nothing but the company of these? He glanced around the room. Items also, it could be she was he forgot the medical term for it, but essentially it was a woman attracted to power or strength. Still, it didn't matter. Whatever her reasons were, they were her own. Still, he should kill her. It was what any ninja would do. Still, he was also a Jedi, or was trained as one, and killing someone in their sleep wasn't the Jedi way. Naruto sighed. He wouldn't be able to just kill someone like this, especially if that someone was as good a kisser as this one. So carrying her back to her bed, he set her down. Looking to the lightsaber, discarded on the floor, he called it back to his hands. Looking back to the sleeping girl, he shook his head. Crazy bitch, he muttered before he leaped up into the ventilation shaft, making his escape from the sound base. 2 hours later. Tenten, Niji, and Lee all sat around the table in Tazuna's house. On the table was a map of the sewers. Okay, look, we can't just sit here for a whole day, Niji. If he's in trouble, he may not even last a day, Tenten said to the Hyuga boy. The area's still hot, Tenten. If we go back there less than 12 hours since we escaped, the place is still on high alert, and it would place us all in danger, he argued back. Before they could continue, the door opened, revealing the blonde-haired teammate they were currently discussing. Stepping into the house, he made his way past his teammates. I have made my way through a river of literal crap, been chased by freaky mutant things, an even freakier girl, and had to walk across an entire ocean. I just want a shower and a good bed to sleep in. Good day to you all. With that said, the blonde walked past them and into the bathroom where he would take his aforementioned shower, leaving 3 somewhat stunned teammates behind. Tomorrow they'd be back on their way to Konoha. As the blonde finally sat down, his mind came to a screeching halt as he remembered. Fuck, I forgot to get the info on the sound base. Come on, Naruto. Why the hell won't you tell us how you escaped? Tenten whined cutely as she pouted at the blonde-haired boy, who simply would not crack no matter how much they prodded and poked at him as they made their way back to Konoha. They had left Wave with a somewhat long goodbye from Tazuna and his family. The road back was long and boring. They were behind their planned schedule already, mainly because Naruto couldn't stop smiling and staring at his name on the bridge until he had to practically carry him away. Naruto sighed and glared at her from the corner of his eye. Tenten, would you please just drop it? I'm not telling you what happened, and that's final. She huffed and crossed her arms in annoyance and anger. Well, whatever, I'll just read the mission reports later, she finished somewhat smugly. Naruto growled in annoyance, remembering that mission reports for all C-rank missions and below were open to the public, as would be rank, unless the Hokage deemed their information classified. A rank and above were always classified to all but high-ranking Anbu, the Hokage, and the team that went on the mission. So Tenten could easily go down to the archives and get the report later, like she said. And if he cut out pieces of the report, which with his luck he would undoubtedly be, he'd be charged with treason and either demoted or held in Konoha's penitentiary for 6 months. Then when he'd get out, they'd demote him 1 rank. Of course, seeing as how he's a genin, the only thing left would be academy student, meaning he'd have to go back to Irika-sensei's classes. How did he know this? Well, simple. Because some jackass had tried to do it when he had filled out the report from the Wave mission so long ago, claiming that he had lied in the report, refusing to believe he had saved Kakashi or that the great Uchiha had his ass thoroughly handed to him. His teammates never knew about it. Kakashi did end up pulling his ass out of the fire when he backed up his mission report with his own. Still, it had been a harsh introduction into the bureaucratic world for the young, ninja-Jedi hybrid. Niji and Lee hung back, watching the interaction of their female teammate with their blonde-haired comrade. It was somewhat strange for them. Usually their missions were escort missions or scouting missions, both of which she usually did not have another male her age to speak to besides them. The fact that she was so talkative with him, as well as somewhat teasing in her own playful manner, was certainly sending a mixture of emotions through the two young Konoha ninja. With Lee it was more like a brotherly protectiveness, meanwhile with Niji it was the green little acid at the base of his throat called jealousy.